The world returned to Leo in a cascade of mud, cold, and confusion. He gasped, choking on damp earth as he pushed himself up from the puddle he'd been lying in. Rainwater trickled down his face, mixing with the grime that coated what had been, moments ago, hours, his clean-shaven engineer's face. His last memory was the blinding headlights of a truck swerving on the rain-slicked highway, the screech of brakes, and then, this. He blinked, trying to clear his vision. Around him stretched not the familiar asphalt and steel of his city, but a landscape of despair. Dilapidated huts with sagging thatch roofs huddled together like frightened animals. A broken wooden fence encircled what might have been a vegetable garden, now overrun with weeds. The air smelled of damp rot, unwashed bodies, and something else, a metallic tang of fear. And the people. 10 of them, maybe, standing in a ragged semicircle, staring at him with hollow eyes set in gaunt faces. Their clothes were little more than rags, patched and stained. One woman held a child who was too thin, too quiet. A man with a grizzled beard leaned on a crude walking stick, his knuckles white with tension. Before Leo could speak, a shimmering blue screen materialized in his vision, hovering just beyond the mud-streaked peasants. Kingdom Symbiosis System initialized. User designated, Leo. Title, Lord of Dust Haven. Settlement status, Crumbling Hamlet, Level 0. Population, 11, including Lord. Resources, minimal. Threat level, high. Objective, ensure survival through growth. Each settlement level up will trigger symbiotic mutations in the Lord's body, enhancing capabilities tied to the land's development, ***. Leo's breath caught. Isekai'd. The word floated up from his memories of late-night web novels and gaming forums. Transferred to another world. But this wasn't some heroic fantasy, this was a nightmare of starvation and decay. The system's words burned into his mind, symbiotic mutations. He pushed the thought aside. First, survival. He stood, mud squelching under his boots, boots that were now worn leather, not his polished work shoes. I'm Leo, he said, his voice rough. What's the situation? The bearded man, Eldrin, as he introduced himself with a wary bow, spoke in a gravelly tone. Lord, we've had no rain in weeks until yesterday. Our well ran dry. The creek's contaminated. We're drinking mud and hoping not to die of thirst before we starve. Leo's engineer's mind clicked into gear. Water. Priority 1. He surveyed the hamlet, Dust Haven, the system called it. The land sloped slightly toward the east. He remembered groundwater tables, soil permeability, basic hydrology from his civil engineering degree. Show me where the old well is, he commanded. They led him to a stone-lined pit in the center of the settlement. It was dry, with a few inches of foul-smelling sludge at the bottom. Leo knelt, examining the stones. Crude, but serviceable. He looked at the 10 faces watching him, Eldrin, the woman with the child, Mara, he learned, a younger man named Kale with nervous eyes, and others whose names he'd learn later. Hope was a fragile thing in their expressions, buried under layers of exhaustion. We're digging a new well, Leo announced. Here. He pointed to a spot 30 feet downhill from the old well, where the soil looked darker. The water table should be higher. We need digging tools, ropes, buckets. Eldrin shook his head. Our tools broke months ago. We've been using sticks and our hands. Leo felt a surge of frustration, then pushed it down. Adapt. Improvise. He spotted a fallen oak tree at the edge of the clearing, its trunk half-rotted. Then we make new ones. Kale, Mara, gather any sharp stones you can find. Eldrin, help me with that tree. For 3 days, they worked. Leo's modern knowledge became their lifeline. He showed them how to fashion crude shovels from split oak and lashed stones, using vines as bindings. He taught them to reinforce the well shaft with interlocking stones to prevent collapse, a technique from ancient Roman engineering he'd studied. He organized shifts, digging, hauling dirt, resting, to conserve their meager energy. His own muscles ached in ways they never had from office work, but he drove himself harder than any of them, his leadership earned through blisters and shared hunger. On the first day, they hit damp soil. On the second, a trickle of muddy water. On the third afternoon, as Leo was waist-deep in the hole, his makeshift shovel struck something with a hollow thunk. Water, clear and cold, bubbled up around his feet. He shouted, "We've got it." The villagers gathered, their murmurs rising to excited chatter. They lowered a bucket made of woven reeds, another of Leo's improvisations, and hauled up the first drinkable water they'd seen in weeks. Mara wept as she gave her child a sip. Eldrin clasped Leo's shoulder, his eyes bright. In that moment, the system screen flashed again. Dusthaven level up. Settlement status, stable hamlet, level 1. Achievement, secure water source. Mutation triggered, stone grip arm. Pain exploded in Leo's right arm. It wasn't the sharp agony of injury, but a deep, grinding transformation. He cried out, clutching his elbow as his flesh rippled. The villagers backed away, their joy turning to terror. Leo watched in horror as his skin darkened, taking on the rough texture of bark. His fingers elongated, joints stiffening into gnarled wood. The transformation spread from his fingertips to his shoulder, leaving his arm looking like it had been carved from petrified oak. It was heavy, alien, but as the pain subsided, he felt a surge of power coursing through it. He could feel the grain of the wood, the solidity of stone beneath the surface. He flexed his new fingers, and they responded with crushing strength. Before he could process it, a scream cut through the air. One of the huts, a storage shed near the old well, collapsed with a crash of rotting timber. A peasant, a young man named Joran who'd been fetching tools, was trapped beneath a fallen beam, his leg pinned. He writhed, crying for help. Leo didn't hesitate. He sprinted across the clearing, his petrified arm feeling strangely balanced despite its weight. The beam was thick, waterlogged oak, 3 men might have struggled to lift it. Leo gripped it with his transformed hand. The wood groaned in his grasp. He braced his feet, his normal left hand supporting, and heaved. The beam lifted as if it were kindling. Leo felt no strain, only the raw, effortless power of his mutation. He tossed the timber aside, where it landed with a thud that shook the ground. Joran scrambled free, his eyes wide as he stared at Leo's arm. Leo reached to help him up, but Joran flinched away, scrambling backward on his elbows. All around, the villagers were staring. Mara clutched her child tighter. Eldrin's hand went to a rusty knife at his belt. Their faces were a mask of horror, the same horror Leo felt looking at his own arm. He was their savior, but now he was also a monster. "It's still me," Leo said, his voice low. He held up his petrified hand, the wooden fingers curling slowly. This is the price of the well. Of your water." No one spoke. The twilight deepened, casting long shadows across Dusthaven. The first stars prickled in the violet sky. Then, from the dark line of the forest beyond the broken fence, a howl echoed, long, mournful, and hungry. It was answered by another, closer. Glowing red eyes ignited in the shadows between the trees, pairs of them, moving with predatory intent. They fixed on the hamlet, on the flickering firelight, on the people huddled together in fear. Leo turned, his petrified arm falling to his side. The eyes advanced, stepping into the dim light. They belonged to hunched, green-skinned creatures with jagged teeth and crude spears, goblins, a dozen of them, their red eyes gleaming with malice. The lead one snarled, pointing a clawed finger at Leo, at his mutated arm, as if recognizing something unnatural. The villagers froze, caught between the horror of their lord's transformation and the threat approaching from the woods. Leo felt the weight of his new arm, the strength in it, and the cold dread in his gut. The kingdom's symbiosis system had given him power, but it had also marked him. And now, the wilderness had come to claim its due. The goblins came at dawn, just as Leo had feared. He hadn't slept. How could he? His right arm, now a twisted mass of petrified wood that ended in gnarled, bark-covered fingers, rested on the crude wooden table in what passed for Dusthaven's command center. The villagers' terrified stares from yesterday still burned in his mind, but the distant howls had grown closer through the night, and survival trumped social anxiety. "They're coming," Leo said, his voice rough with exhaustion. He stood, the weight of his stone arm making the motion awkward. "Eldrin, gather everyone at the palisade. Mara, take the children to the storage hut. Kale, Joran, with me." Outside, the morning mist clung to the ground like a shroud. The palisade surrounding Dusthaven was pathetic, rotting timbers lashed together with fraying rope, gaps wide enough for a child to slip through. Leo surveyed it with an engineer's critical eye. "We need to reinforce the western section first. That's where the terrain gives them cover." "My lord," Eldrin whispered, his eyes fixed on Leo's transformed arm. What happened to you?" "It doesn't matter right now," Leo snapped, then softened his tone. The old man's fear was palpable. "What matters is that this," he raised his stone arm, "can help us survive. Watch." He approached a stack of timber they'd salvaged from collapsed huts. With a grunt, he wrapped his stone fingers around a log thicker than his thigh. The wood groaned, then splintered as he lifted it with impossible ease. The villagers gasped. Leo felt no strain, the arm moved with a strange, fluid strength, as if the petrification had granted it the density and power of ancient oak. "See?" Leo said, trying to sound confident. "Now help me get this into place." For the next hour, they worked in frantic silence. Leo used his stone arm to drive logs deep into the earth, creating a makeshift barrier where the palisade was weakest. Kale and Joran followed, lashing the new timbers to the old structure with whatever cordage they could find. The villagers watched, their terror slowly giving way to something like awe as Leo single-handedly lifted beams that would have required 3 men to move. Then the first arrow thudded into the dirt at Leo's feet. "Take cover," he roared. The goblins emerged from the mist like nightmares given form, short, wary creatures with mottled green skin and eyes that glowed with malicious intelligence. There were 6 of them, armed with crude bows and rusted blades. They moved with unnerving coordination, fanning out to test the palisade's defenses. "They're probing for weaknesses," Leo muttered. He crouched behind the newly reinforced section, his stone arm resting against the timber. "Don't waste arrows. Wait until they're close." But the villagers had no military training. Mara's husband, a gaunt man named Tom, panicked and loosed an arrow that sailed harmlessly over the goblins' heads. The creatures chittered with laughter, their high-pitched voices like grinding stones. One goblin darted forward, its blade flashing as it tried to slip through a gap in the eastern palisade. Leo moved without thinking. His stone arm swung in a wide arc, connecting with the goblin's torso. There was a sickening crunch, and the creature flew backward, landing in a broken heap 10 feet away. The other goblins hesitated. Leo stood tall, his stone arm dripping with dark ichor. "Come on then," he shouted, the adrenaline making his voice boom. They came all at once, a coordinated rush from 3 directions. Arrows peppered the palisade. One struck Joran in the shoulder, and the man cried out, stumbling backward. Leo grabbed a fallen timber with his stone hand and hurled it like a javelin. It took a goblin in the chest, pinning it to the ground. "Fall back," the lead goblin screeched in broken common. "The stone man is too strong." As quickly as they'd appeared, the goblins melted back into the mist, dragging their wounded with them. Silence descended, broken only by Joran's pained breathing and the distant caw of a crow. Leo slumped against the palisade, his human hand trembling. The stone arm felt heavy, alien. He looked down at it, the bark-like texture, the way it merged seamlessly with his flesh at the shoulder. A permanent reminder that he was no longer entirely human. Is it over?" Mara asked, peering from the storage hut. "For now," Leo said. He turned to Joran. "Let me see that wound." The arrow had gone clean through the muscle of Joran's shoulder. Leo used his stone fingers to snap the shaft, then pulled the head free with a quick, practiced motion. Joran screamed, then passed out from the pain. "Clean it with boiled water and wrap it tight," Leo instructed Eldrin. "He'll live." As the villagers tended to Joran, Leo surveyed their supplies. The goblin attack had been repelled, but it revealed a more insidious threat. Dusthaven was starving. Their food stores consisted of a few sacks of moldy grain and some root vegetables so shriveled they looked like fossils. "We need to plant," Leo announced that afternoon, gathering the villagers in the central clearing. "Properly. Not whatever haphazard farming you've been doing." Eldrin looked skeptical. "My lord, the soil here is poor. It's been farmed to exhaustion." "Then we'll restore it," Leo said. He knelt, using a stick to draw in the dirt. 3-field rotation. "We divide our arable land into 3 sections. 1 for winter crops, rye, wheat. 1 for spring crops, barley, oats. 1 lies fallow to recover." The villagers stared at his diagram as if it were magic. In a way, it was centuries of agricultural knowledge from another world, distilled into simple lines in the dirt. "But we need to eat now," Mara protested, her child clinging to her leg. "The fallow field won't produce anything." "It will in the long run," Leo explained patiently. "And we can supplement with hunting and foraging. But if we keep farming the same soil year after year, it will eventually refuse to grow anything at all." They worked through the afternoon, marking out the fields with stakes and rope. Leo directed the plowing, using the village's single ox, a bony creature that looked as starved as its owners, to turn the earth. His stone arm proved useful again, clearing rocks and breaking up hardpan that would have taken hours with ordinary tools. As the sun began to set, Leo felt a strange tingling in his legs. At first, he thought it was just fatigue, but the sensation grew stronger, spreading up from his feet like roots digging into the earth. He stumbled, catching himself against a fence post. "My lord?" Kale asked, concern in his voice. "I'm fine," Leo gasped, but he wasn't. The tingling became a burning, then a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to connect him to the very ground beneath his feet. He looked down and saw his legs beginning to change. The transformation was slower than the arm had been, but no less terrifying. His trousers split as thick, root-like appendages erupted from his flesh, wrapping around his legs in intricate patterns. They dug into the soil, anchoring him in place. Leo tried to move, but his feet were fused to the earth, drawing up something. Not water. Something brighter, more potent. Mana. The word came to him unbidden, a whisper from the kingdom's Symbiosis System. His new legs were drawing mana from the ground, channeling it through his body. He felt a surge of energy, a stamina that made his previous exhaustion seem like a distant memory. But the price was mobility. When the roots were active, he was rooted in place. The villagers backed away, their faces pale with horror. Even Eldrin, who had begun to accept Leo's stone arm, looked ready to flee. "Don't be afraid," Leo said, though his own heart hammered against his ribs. "It's another gift. From the land." He concentrated, trying to will the roots to recede. Slowly, painfully, they withdrew into his flesh, leaving his legs human-shaped but covered in intricate, bark-like patterns. He could still feel the connection to the earth, a low hum of power waiting to be tapped. That night, as Leo studied the changes in his body by firelight, a notification appeared in his vision. Settlement level up. Dusthaven has reached level 2, thriving hamlet. Population, 12. Food security, stable. Defenses, basic. New mutation unlocked, earthanchor legs. He had done it. Through better farming, he had pushed Dusthaven to the next level. But the cost was written on his body, first the arm, now the legs. What would be next? His eyes? His heart? The storm hit 2 days later. It came from the north, a wall of black clouds that blotted out the sun. Wind howled through the valley, tearing at the thatched roofs of Dusthaven's huts. Rain fell in sheets, turning the newly plowed fields into quagmires. The southern field. Eldrin shouted over the gale. The runoff is washing away the topsoil. Leo ran, or tried to. The rain-slicked ground made movement treacherous. Halfway to the threatened field, he felt the erosion happening, a subtle shifting of the earth that his new legs sensed before his eyes could see it. A gully was forming, carving through their precious farmland, carrying away soil that had taken generations to accumulate. "Stand back." Leo ordered the villagers who had gathered to watch the destruction. He planted his feet in the mud at the head of the forming gully. Closing his eyes, he reached for the connection he'd felt when his legs first transformed. The roots erupted again, thicker this time, digging deep into the earth. He felt the mana flow, a cool, clear stream of energy that stabilized the soil, binding particles together, reinforcing the ground against the torrential rain. For 10 minutes, he stood there like a tree in a flood, his root legs drinking from the earth, his body channeling mana to hold the field together. When the storm finally passed, the gully had been arrested, its advance stopped by Leo's anchored presence. He pulled his roots back, panting with effort. The villagers approached cautiously, their fear now mixed with something else, respect, perhaps, or awe. "You saved the harvest," Mara said softly. "We saved it," Leo corrected, though his voice was weary. "I just helped." As the villagers began assessing the damage, a young boy, Mara's son, Leo realized, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama, look." The child pointed to a hill overlooking Dusthaven. Standing there, silhouetted against the clearing sky, was a figure in fine clothing. Even at this distance, Leo could see the cut of the garments, noble garb, out of place in this wilderness. The stranger stood perfectly still, watching. Then, as if sensing he'd been noticed, the figure turned and disappeared over the crest of the hill. A peasant, Leo recognized him as Finn, one of the quieter villagers, came running from the direction of the hill, his face pale. "My lord," he burst out, skidding to a stop in the mud. There was a man up there. Dressed like a lord, with a hawk on his glove. He was watching us, writing in a book. Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. The goblins had been a simple threat, violent, but straightforward. A noble observing from a distance, taking notes. That spoke of something more complicated. Something political. Did you see which way he went? Leo asked. North, Finn said. Toward Baron's territory. Leo looked at his transformed limbs, the stone arm, the legs that could root him to the earth. He had built a stable settlement, repelled monsters, implemented advanced agriculture. But now someone from the world of men had taken notice. And in his experience, men with power were often more dangerous than monsters. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dust Haven, illuminating the awkward, lumbering gait of its lord. Leo walked with the careful deliberation of a man balancing on stilts, his earth anchor legs, thick, root-like appendages that ended in clawed, wooden feet, dragging slightly with each step. The transformation from 2 days prior had settled into a permanent reality. When he stood still, he could feel the faint pull of mana from the soil, a subtle energy that enhanced his stamina. But movement came at the cost of unnatural weight and stiffness, as if his legs remembered their purpose as anchors more than limbs. He paused at the edge of the village's central clearing, where the 10 villagers, their faces still gaunt but now with the first hints of color from regular meals, had gathered around a rough-hewn table. On it lay Leo's latest creation, a detailed blueprint of stone walls, drawn with charcoal on stretched hide. His stone grip arm, the petrified wood gleaming dully in the light, tapped a specific section. "We need defenses," Leo said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had saved them twice over. The goblin scouts were just the beginning. And that stranger Finn saw. He didn't need to finish. The memory of the noble-clad watcher hung in the air like a gathering storm. Eldrin, the older peasant with leathery skin and wary eyes, leaned forward. "Stone walls, my lord. We've barely enough hands to tend the fields." "We'll work in shifts," Leo replied, his engineering mind already calculating labor distribution. "The 3-field rotation is yielding more than we can eat immediately. We store the surplus and use the freed time to build. Kale, you'll lead the quarrying team, there's limestone in the western ridge. Joran, once your shoulder heals, you oversee masonry. Mara, organize the children to gather mortar materials." He met their hesitant gazes, his own human eye, the left one, holding steady while his right, he noticed with a detached horror, had begun to develop a faint crystalline sheen at the edges. Another subtle change, another step away from the man he'd been. This isn't just about walls. It's about sending a message. To goblins, to bandits, to anyone watching. Dust Haven is no longer a starving hamlet to be plundered. For 3 days, the rhythm of hammers and chisels replaced the quiet of the wilderness. Leo moved among them, his root legs making his supervision a visible struggle. He demonstrated proper stone-cutting techniques, using his stone grip arm to split stubborn slabs with controlled, powerful blows that sent vibrations through the ground. At night, he'd activate his earth anchor ability, feeling the roots dig deeper into the soil, drawing mana that let him work through the pain of his stiffening joints. The villagers watched with a mixture of awe and terror. Their lord was becoming something other, something that could lift stones 3 men couldn't budge, yet whose very body seemed to rebel against its own form. On the 4th morning, as the last stone was fitted into place, a notification shimmered before Leo's eyes, visible only to him. Kingdom Symbiosis System Alert. Settlement, Dust Haven. Status, Fortified Hamlet, Level 3. Achievements, Sustainable Agriculture, Basic Defenses, Population Stability. Mutation triggered. Leo barely had time to brace himself before fire erupted along his spine. It wasn't heat but a tearing, cracking sensation, as if his bones were being reforged in a crucible of agony. He stumbled against the newly completed wall, his stone grip arm leaving a dent in the limestone. Villagers cried out, backing away as plates of dark, chitinous material burst through his tunic, spreading across his back and shoulders with audible clicks and snaps. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot lance that made his previous mutations feel like mild discomfort. When it subsided, he was left panting, sweat dripping from his human skin onto the carapace that now covered his upper body like a living armor. He reached back with his stone hand, feeling the smooth, interlocking plates. They were cool to the touch, ridged like insect shell, and when he flexed, they moved with him, a natural extension that offered protection at the cost of constant, dull ache. Carapace shield, his mind supplied, the system's knowledge settling into place. Near impenetrable defense against piercing and slashing attacks. Another tool. Another curse. "My lord." Mara whispered, her child hiding behind her skirts. Leo forced himself upright, ignoring the throbbing in his back. The walls are complete, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Celebrate that. They didn't celebrate. They returned to their huts with sidelong glances, whispers trailing in their wake. Asterisk monster. Cursed. What next? Asterisk Leo heard them, each word a tiny cut beneath his carapace. He stood alone by the gate, watching the sunset paint the stones in hues of blood and gold. The attack came at twilight. A dozen bandits emerged from the tree line, armed with rusted swords and hunting bows. They were desperate men, lean and scarred, their leader a hulking brute with a notched axe. They'd seen the new walls, assumed wealth within. Leo had positioned Eldrin and Kale on the palisade walkway with hunting spears, but the Real defense stood at the gate. Open up, the bandit leader roared, his voice coarse with greed. Or we burn your pretty walls down. Leo stepped forward, his root legs planting firmly. Leave. Now. The leader laughed, a harsh bark. Look at this freak. Boys, fill him with arrows. 6 archers drew. Leo didn't flinch. He activated his earth anchor legs, feeling the roots dig deep, mana flooding his system. The first volley whistled through the air. Arrows struck his chest, his shoulders, his carapace, and shattered. The sound was like hail on stone, the shaft splintering against the chitinous plates. Not a single point penetrated. The bandits stared, their confidence crumbling. What in the hells? The leader muttered. Leo didn't give them time to regroup. He released his anchor, the roots retracting with a painful wrench, and charged. His stone grip arm swung in a wide arc, catching the nearest bandit in the ribs. Bones cracked audibly, the man flying backward into 2 others. Another arrow thudded into Leo's back, shattering harmlessly. He grabbed a second bandit by the throat, his petrified fingers closing with careful, measured force, enough to choke, not crush. The man went limp. The leader charged, axe raised high. Leo turned, taking the blow on his carapaced shoulder. The axe bit deep, deeper than any arrow, but lodged in the chitin, stuck fast. Leo didn't feel the impact, only the vibration through his plates. With his free hand, he seized the leader's wrist. The man struggled, eyes wide with terror as Leo's stone fingers tightened. You should have left, Leo said quietly. He didn't kill him. Instead, he applied pressure until the wrist bones ground together, until the axe dropped from nerveless fingers. The leader screamed, falling to his knees. The remaining bandits broke, fleeing into the gathering dark. Silence descended, broken only by the leader's whimpers. Leo looked at his villagers, who had watched from the walls. Their faces were a mosaic of fear, gratitude, and revulsion. He had saved them again. He was more monster than man. Bind him, Leo ordered, gesturing to the bandit leader. We'll question him tomorrow. As the villagers descended to secure the prisoner, Finn pushed through the crowd, his face pale. My lord. The stranger, the one with the hawk, he's back. At the gate. Leo turned, his carapace plates clicking softly. There, beyond the open gateway, stood a man in fine noble garb, a hooded hawk perched on his leather-gloved hand. In his other hand, he held a rolled scroll sealed with crimson wax. He didn't approach the blood-stained ground where Leo stood, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, took in everything, the stone walls, the shattered arrows, the monstrous lord with his stone arm and chitinous back. Leo of Dusthaven, the stranger called, his voice carrying the clipped tones of formal education. I bear a summons from Regional Baron Valerius. You are accused of unsanctioned expansion, unlawful fortification, and... His gaze swept over Leo's transformed body. Consorting with dark forces. You are to present yourself at the Baron's keep within 3 days to answer these charges. He tossed the scroll onto the ground, where it landed with a soft thud. The hawk shrieked once, a piercing sound that echoed off the new walls, before the stranger turned and disappeared into the twilight. Leo stared at the scroll, the wax seal gleaming like a drop of blood in the fading light. The walls had cost him his back, his comfort, his humanity. Now, they might cost him his freedom. The villagers gathered behind him, their whispers dying into a fearful hush. The kingdom grew. The monster deepened. And the world, it seemed, was just beginning to notice. The journey to Baron Valerius's keep took 3 days through winding forest paths that Leo navigated with grim determination. He wore a heavy woolen cloak that draped over his shoulders, concealing the chitinous plating that now covered his back like a turtle's shell. The carapace shield had settled into a constant, dull ache, a reminder of the price paid for Dusthaven's stone walls. Beneath the cloak, his right arm remained petrified wood, the stone grip arm hidden by rolled-up sleeves and gloves, while his earth anchor legs, thick and root-like, moved with a lumbering gait that he tried to mask by walking slowly. Eldrin had insisted on accompanying him, the older peasant's weathered face etched with concern. "They'll see you as a monster, my lord," he'd warned as they packed supplies of dried meat and hardtack. "The Baron's court is full of snakes who'd sell their own mothers for a copper." Leo had merely nodded, his mind already calculating angles of approach. As a civil engineer in his previous life, he'd dealt with bureaucrats and inspectors, men who wielded paper like weapons. This would be no different, except the stakes were survival, and the weapons were literal. On the morning of the fourth day, the keep rose from the mist, a squat fortress of grey stone perched on a hill, its banners flapping in the cold wind. Guards in polished breastplates eyed them with suspicion as they passed through the gatehouse, their spears gleaming. The courtyard bustled with activity, merchants hawking wares, servants scurrying with trays, and courtiers in velvet doublets laughing too loudly. Leo kept his hood up, his transformed body screaming for release from the confinement of cloth. Inside the great hall, the air smelled of smoke and sweat. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes lined the walls, and a fire roared in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. At the far end, on a wooden throne carved with lions, sat Baron Valerius, a man in his 50s with a graying beard and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a fur-trimmed robe, and a jeweled dagger hung at his belt. To his left stood a hawk-faced man in scholar's robes, the same spy who delivered the summons. "Leo of Dusthaven," the Baron announced, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "You stand accused of unsanctioned expansion, unlawful fortification, and consorting with dark forces. How do you plead?" Leo lowered his hood slowly, letting the courtiers get their first look at his face. Gasps rippled through the hall. His eyes, that was what they noticed first. Overnight, after Dusthaven had leveled up to trading hamlet, level 4, from establishing a rudimentary trade route with a passing merchant caravan, his eyes had transformed. They were now multifaceted crystals, like cut gemstones, that refracted light in prismatic patterns. The mutation, resource sight eyes allowed him to see the world in layers of vitality, mineral veins glowing beneath the earth, plants pulsing with health, even the faint auras of magic. He ignored the whispers. "I plead necessity, my lord. Dusthaven was starving when I arrived. The fortifications are against goblin raids, which your guards have done nothing to stop. As for dark forces..." He spread his hands, the gesture careful to keep his petrified arm hidden in the cloak's folds. "I have only ever used what the land grants me to protect my people." A courtier with a sneer stepped forward, a younger man with oiled hair and a silver chain. "Protect them? Or transform them into abominations like yourself?" Look at his eyes. They're not human. Leo felt the familiar pang of alienation, sharp as the chronic pain in his back. But he prepared for this. "My eyes see what yours cannot," he said, his voice steady. "They see the wealth hidden in your very lands. While you tax starving peasants, I can find silver where you see only rock." The Baron leaned forward, interest flickering in his gaze. "Is that so? Prove it." Over the next hour, Leo negotiated with the precision of a structural engineer calculating load-bearing walls. The Baron demanded a tax of 50 gold crowns, an impossible sum for Dusthaven. Leo countered by offering exclusive trade rights to rare herbs that grew in the forest near his settlement, herbs his crystal eyes had identified as having potent medicinal properties. He described them in detail: moonlace with its silver-veined leaves, fever root that glowed with a warm amber light to his sight, dream thistle that pulsed with a faint blue magic. "And there's more," Leo added, lowering his voice so only the Baron and his hawk-faced advisor could hear. "A day's ride west of here, beneath the old oak grove, there's a silver deposit. Not a vein, a lode. Your miners have missed it for generations because it's buried under a layer of ironstone that looks identical to the surrounding rock. But to my eyes..." He tapped his temple, the crystalline facets catching the firelight. "It shines like a beacon." The Baron's greed warred with his suspicion. He dispatched a team of miners with Leo to verify the claim. Using his resource sight eyes, Leo guided them to the exact spot, a rocky outcrop that looked no different from any other. When the miners broke through the ironstone, the glint of raw silver confirmed his words. The Baron's demeanor shifted instantly, from accusatory to calculating. Back in the Great Hall, a new scroll was drafted. Dusthaven was granted legitimacy as a recognized settlement under Baron Valerius's protection, with reduced taxes in exchange for 20% of the silver yield and first rights to the rare herbs. Leo signed with his left hand, his right still hidden. The victory tasted like ashes, he'd bought safety with bribery, and every courtier's smile felt like a knife waiting to twist. As he and Eldrin left the keep at dusk, the older peasant muttered, "You saved us, my lord. But at what cost?" Leo didn't answer. His crystal eyes were already scanning the horizon, seeing the world in layers of glowing energy. The forest pulsed with green life, the distant mountains gleamed with mineral deposits, and Dusthaven, now a tiny dot of structured order in the wilderness, shone with the soft gold of civilization. But there were darker threads too, patches of sickly yellow where blight had taken root, and faint red tendrils that smelled of decay to his enhanced senses. They traveled through the night, Leo's earth anchor legs allowing him to march without rest, though he had to stop periodically to unroot himself from the ground when the mana draw became too intense. By dawn, they reached Dusthaven's gates. The stone walls stood firm, and smoke rose from hearths, a sight that should have brought relief. Instead, they found chaos. Villagers clustered in the central square, their faces pale. Mara stood weeping, clutching her child. Kale and Joran were directing others to bring water from the well. And in the middle of it all, a peasant child, a boy of no more than 6 named Tobin, whom Leo recognized from the fields, lay on a blanket, crying weakly. Leo pushed through the crowd, his cloak flapping open to reveal the chitinous plating on his back. The villagers recoiled, but their fear was overshadowed by a newer terror. "What happened?" he demanded. Eldrin knelt beside the boy. "He wandered too close to the forest edge yesterday. Came back complaining of aches. Now, look." Leo activated his resource sight eyes fully. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of energy. The boy's body should have glowed with the vibrant green of health. Instead, it was threaded with pulsing violet tendrils, a color he hadn't seen before, one that smelled of ozone and rot. The tendrils snaked through the child's veins, concentrating around his heart and lungs, leeching the life from him in visible waves. To Leo's crystal vision, it looked like a parasitic network, glowing with malicious intent. He'd seen similar patterns in the forest during their return, faint traces of that same violet energy clinging to leaves and soil. But here, in a living child, it was magnified 100-fold. "It's a plague," Leo whispered, the words tasting like poison. "Magical. Spreading from the forest." Mara sobbed louder. "Can you save him? With your gifts?" Leo looked at his hands, one flesh, one petrified wood. He thought of his stone arm's strength, his rooted leg's stamina, his carapace's defense, his crystal eye's sight. None of them were healing abilities. The kingdom's symbiosis system had given him power to build and destroy, but not to mend. And as he watched, the violet tendrils in the boy's chest pulsed brighter, spreading infinitesimally further. Other villagers began to cough, a dry, hacking sound. When Leo scanned them with his crystal eyes, he saw the same violet threads beginning to take root in their bodies too, faint but growing. He stood there, a monster in a cloak, surrounded by the people he'd sworn to protect, watching a plague unfold before his enhanced vision. The Baron's taxes, the beastmen army marching somewhere in the north, the political games, all of it faded to background noise. This was a threat no wall could stop, no mutation could crush. The child's crying softened to whimpers. Leo's crystal eyes reflected the dying light, showing him a future where Dusthaven's hard-won stability crumbled not under siege, but from within. And he had no idea how to stop it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dusthaven, but no one greeted its warmth. Instead, a pall of dread hung over the village, thicker than the morning mist. Leo stood at the edge of the newly designated quarantine zone, a cluster of huts separated from the main settlement by a hastily erected wooden barrier. His crystalline resource sight eyes, which normally shimmered with the vibrant greens and golds of plant vitality and mineral veins, now saw only sickly violet tendrils writhing through the air like spectral serpents. Inside the largest hut, Tobin lay on a straw pallet, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. The violet tendrils Leo had first observed were no longer just visible to his mutated eyes, they had manifested physically, thin filaments of glowing purple energy that pulsed from the boy's skin into the air, dissipating like smoke. 3 other villagers, an elderly woman named Hilda, a young farmer called Bren, and Mara's sister Alara, showed similar symptoms, though less advanced. "Lord Leo," Eldrin's voice was hoarse with worry as he approached, keeping a respectful distance. Like all the villagers, he couldn't see the violet tendrils, but he could see their effects. "The spring water we've been drawing, it tastes bitter now. And 2 more have taken to their beds this morning." Leo nodded, his petrified wood arm flexing unconsciously. "Seal off the main well." No one drinks from it until I say otherwise. He turned to Kale, who stood nearby with a group of laborers. Dig 3 new pits downstream from the village. We'll use them for waste disposal until we understand this plague's nature. As the villagers scattered to their tasks, Leo closed his eyes, feeling the familiar ache in his back where the chitinous carapace shield plates fused with his spine. The kingdom's symbiosis system thrummed in his awareness, a constant presence at the edge of his consciousness that connected him to every stone wall, every planted field, every beating heart in Dust Haven. The settlement was at trading hamlet level 4, stable but fragile. And now this. He made his way to the village's small collection of salvaged books and scrolls, mostly tax records and farming almanacs brought by refugees over the years. But among them were a few medical texts, their pages brittle with age. Leo spent the afternoon cross-referencing symptoms, his engineering mind treating the plague like a structural failure to be analyzed. The text spoke of miasma sickness that had swept through the region centuries ago, spread through contaminated water and close contact. The cure had been lost when the old empire fell. By evening, Leo had a theory. The plague wasn't just biological, it was magical, a corruption that fed on life energy. His resource sight eyes confirmed it, the violet tendrils drained vitality from the infected, then spread through water and air to new hosts. Conventional medicine would fail. They needed to attack the vector. Joran, Leo called to the laborer whose shoulder had healed from the goblin arrow wound. Gather every able-bodied villager. We're building an aqueduct. Joran blinked. A what, my lord? A channel to bring clean water from the northern hills, Leo explained, already sketching in the dirt with a stick. His modern engineering knowledge supplied the principles: gravity flow, sedimentation basins, covered channels to prevent contamination. We'll route it through a series of sand and charcoal filters I've designed. And we'll build proper latrines with drainage away from the water source. For 3 days, Dust Haven became a hive of frantic activity. Leo worked alongside his people, his earth anchor legs rooting him to the ground when he needed to lift massive stone blocks for the aqueduct's foundation. The thick, root-like appendages drew mana from the earth, fueling his stamina through 16-hour days, but each time he activated them, he became immobile, a statue of flesh and wood that could only watch as others did the delicate work. Mara helped organize the women to weave charcoal-filled baskets for the filtration system. Eldrin supervised the latrine construction, his old hand surprisingly deft with mortar and stone. Even Finn, who had first spotted the noble spy, proved invaluable as a scout, ranging ahead to map the best route for the aqueduct. On the 4th day, as the first clear water began flowing through the finished channel into a newly built stone cistern, Leo felt the familiar surge in the kingdom's symbiosis system. It started as a vibration in his bones, then grew to a resonant hum that echoed through every part of him. The system's interface, visible only to him, shimmered into existence. Settlement level up. Dust Haven has advanced from trading hamlet, level 4, to sanitary village, level 5. Population, 87 souls. Infrastructure, stone walls, 3-field rotation, trade route, aqueduct system, quarantine zone. Threat level, moderate, plague contained, external threats unknown. Before Leo could process the information, pain lanced through his chest. He staggered, one hand going to his sternum as his breath hitched. The villagers nearby cried out and backed away. They'd seen this before, when his legs transformed and when the carapace erupted from his back. This time, the mutation focused on his respiratory system. Leo fell to his knees, gasping as his ribs seemed to expand, the cartilage cracking and reforming. His lungs burned as if filled with molten glass, then cooled into something alien and powerful. When he finally drew breath again, the sound was unlike anything human, a deep, bellows-like wheeze that echoed with unnatural resonance. He looked down at his hands. They trembled, but not from weakness. From power. The kingdom's symbiosis system displayed his new mutation. Mutation acquired, gale breath lungs. Your respiratory organs have transformed into bellows-like structures capable of exhaling concentrated bursts of purified air. The exhalation can cleanse toxins, disperse miasmas, and create localized wind effects. Side effect, chronic throat inflammation and temporary weakness after use. Leo pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the villagers' horrified stares. He could feel the difference with every breath, his lungs held more air, processed it more efficiently, but the act of breathing now carried a constant, low-grade burn in his throat and trachea. My lord. Mara approached cautiously, her child clinging to her skirts. Are you? I'm fine, Leo wheezed, the words coming out rougher than intended. He turned toward the quarantine hut. Bring Tobin to the cistern. Now. When the boy was carried out, wrapped in blankets, the violet tendrils had grown thicker, pulsing with malevolent energy. They reached toward the healthy villagers like seeking fingers. Leo knelt beside the stone cistern, where clean water bubbled from the aqueduct's outlet. Set him here, Leo instructed. As Tobin was laid on the stones, Leo took the deepest breath of his life. His gale-breath lungs expanded far beyond normal human capacity, the bellows-like organs filling with air that his mutation instinctively purified. The burn in his throat intensified to a searing agony, but he held the breath, focusing on the violet tendrils only he could see clearly. Then he exhaled. The sound was like a forge's bellows unleashed. A visible gust of shimmering, purified air erupted from Leo's mouth, carrying with it the scent of ozone and clean mountain wind. It struck Tobin's small form, and the violet tendrils recoiled as if scalded. They writhed, thrashed, then began to dissolve, unraveling into harmless motes of light that faded on the breeze. Leo exhaled until his lungs were empty, then sagged forward, catching himself on his stone-grip arm. Weakness washed over him, the mutation's side effect hitting full force. His vision swam, and the chronic pain from his carapace plates flared in sympathy with his burning throat. But Tobin stirred. The boy's eyes fluttered open, clear for the first time in days. The sickly pallor of his skin receded, replaced by healthy color. He took a breath, a normal, easy breath, and smiled weakly. A cheer went up from the villagers who had gathered to watch. It was hesitant at first, then grew in volume as Mara rushed forward to scoop her nephew into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Eldrin helped Leo to his feet, his old eyes wide with something that might have been awe beneath the fear. You saved him, Eldrin whispered. I used what the system gave me, Leo wheezed, his voice barely audible over the rasp of his damaged throat. He looked at the other infected villagers being brought forward. Line them up. I can, cleanse them all. One by one, Leo used his gale breath to purge the plague from the infected. Each exhalation left him weaker, until after the fourth cleansing, he collapsed entirely, only remaining upright because his earth anchor legs had instinctively rooted him to the ground. The villagers had to physically lift him and carry him to his quarters, where he slept for 14 hours straight. When he awoke, Dusthaven had transformed. The quarantine zone was being dismantled. Children laughed as they played near the new cistern. The aqueduct flowed steadily, providing clean water for drinking, cooking, and the first proper baths many villagers had ever known. The sanitation system was working, the plague's advance had been completely halted. But as Leo stood on the newly reinforced walls, looking out over his growing village, he felt the price of that progress. Every breath hurt. The carapace on his back ached with a deep, bone-deep pain. His legs were becoming less human by the day, the root-like structures occasionally twitching with a life of their own. And his petrified arm, he flexed it, watching the wood-like flesh gleam in the sunlight. He was becoming a monster. A useful monster, perhaps. A protective monster. But a monster nonetheless. Finn found him there as the sun began to set. The peasant scout was breathing hard, having run all the way from the northern watch post. Lord Leo, Finn gasped, doubling over to catch his breath. Riders, from Baron Valerius's territory. Leo's crystalline eyes narrowed. The spy returns. No, my lord. Finn straightened, his face pale. These are different. They wear the Baron's colors, but, they're bloodied. One of them carried this. He handed Leo a scroll sealed with wax that had been hastily broken. Leo unfurled it, his resource site eyes automatically translating the elegant script. To all loyal settlements of the Eastern March. Baron Valerius is dead, assassinated in his own hall by poison and blade. His heir has fled or been captured. The barony descends into chaos. Worse news follows. Scouts report a beastmen army marching from the blighted woods, led by a shaman of terrible power. They bypass the barons' keeps and towns, heading southeast with purpose. Their target appears to be your settlement, Dusthaven. The shaman is said to seek the twisted lord who builds with stone and breathes with bellows, whose flesh is not his own. Prepare your defenses. They will be upon you within the week. May the gods have mercy on us all. Leo let the scroll fall from his fingers. It fluttered to the stones at his feet. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight shadows that seemed to cling to his mutated form. My lord? Finn asked quietly. What do we do? Leo looked out at his village, at the stone walls he'd built, the aqueduct flowing with clean water, the fields growing green with the three-field rotation. At the people who depended on him, even as they feared what he was becoming. He took a breath, the bellows-like lungs expanding with that now familiar burn. We finished the defenses, Leo wheezed, his voice like stones grinding together. And we prepare for war. In the distance, beyond the walls, something howled, a sound that was neither wolf nor man, but something ancient and hungry. The beastmen were coming. And their shaman knew exactly what Leo was becoming. The morning air tasted of iron and damp earth. Leo stood atop the newly completed stone wall of Dusthaven, his patchwork body a testament to the kingdom growing beneath him. The petrified wood of his right arm, the stone grip arm, glistened with morning dew. His legs, transformed into earth anchor roots that burrowed slightly into the stone beneath him, drew a steady trickle of mana from the ground, fortifying his stamina even as they threatened to root him permanently if he pushed too hard. Across his back, the chitinous plates of his carapace shield shifted with each breath, a constant, dull ache that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. Below, the villagers of Dusthaven gathered in the central square, their faces pale with a fear that had nothing to do with the approaching horde. Eldrin, the older peasant, clutched a makeshift spear, his knuckles white. Mara held her child close, her eyes darting between Leo and the forest edge. Kale and Joran stood beside them, armed with farming tools sharpened into crude weapons. They avoided looking directly at their lord, their gazes skittering away from the crystalline facets of his resource-side eyes, which now glowed with an inner light as he scanned the horizon. "They're coming," Leo said, his voice raspier than usual, the gale-breath lungs within his chest already aching in anticipation. He could feel the vibration through his rooted legs, a distant thunder of hundreds of feet. Through his crystal eyes, the world transformed into a tapestry of energy. The forest pulsed with green life force, the stone walls of Dusthaven glowed with steady earth tones, and the villagers shimmered with warm, human vitality. But to the east, a tide of crimson and ochre advanced, beastmen, their life energy burning with predatory hunger. "Form up along the wall," Leo commanded, forcing authority into his strained voice. "Archers to the platforms. Spears at the gates." The villagers moved, their training from the past weeks taking over. They were no longer the emaciated wretches he'd found, they had muscle from labor and purpose from survival, but their terror was palpable. As Leo watched them, his crystalline vision picked out details invisible to others, weak points in the beastmen formation where their energy clustered chaotically, gaps in their ragged lines, and at the center, a pulsating knot of violet-black energy, the shaman. The beastmen emerged from the tree line like a breaking wave. They were hulking, fur-covered humanoids with tusked maws and crude weapons of bone and rusted iron. Their roar shook the air, a guttural promise of slaughter. At their head, the shaman stood apart, a gaunt figure draped in fetishes and bones, his eyes glowing with the same violet energy Leo had seen in the plague tendrils. Those eyes locked onto Leo, and the shaman raised a staff, pointing directly at him. A psychic shriek echoed in Leo's mind, abomination. The first assault hit like a storm. Beastmen charged the walls, scrambling over each other to reach the top. Arrows from Dusthaven's few bows thudded into fur and flesh, but the horde pressed on. Leo moved along the parapet, his stone grip arm smashing a beastman's skull as it crested the wall, the impact sending splinters of bone flying. His carapace shield deflected a thrown axe, the weapon bouncing away with a metallic clang. He could feel each kill through the kingdom's Symbiosis System, a faint tremor in his connection to Dusthaven, like stones dropping into a pond. "They're targeting the gate," Joran shouted from below, where he and others braced with spears. Leo's resource sight eyes flared. He saw the beastmen clustering at the wooden gate, their energy concentrated into a battering ram of flesh. "Fall back from the gate," he roared, his gale-breath lungs straining as he inhaled deeply. The villagers retreated just as the gate splintered. Beastmen poured through the breach, howling in triumph. Leo leaped from the wall, his root legs absorbing the impact with a shudder that sent pain up his spine. He landed in the midst of the invaders, his carapace shield turning aside claws and teeth. His stone grip arm grabbed a beastman by the throat and crushed it, but there were too many. They surrounded him, their violet-tinged eyes wide with hatred for his mutated form. The shaman watched from the tree line, staff raised, chanting. Then, a surge of energy, familiar and terrifying, coursed through Leo. The system's voice echoed in his mind, cold and mechanical, * Dusthaven level up, defensive hamlet level 6 achieved. Mutation triggered, *. Agony exploded in his left arm. He screamed as flesh and bone reconfigured, the sound lost in the battle's din. His left arm elongated, skin darkening to scales of obsidian and emerald. Fingers fused into a serpentine limb tipped with a venomous fang that dripped iridescent fluid. The viper-strike arm writhed with a life of its own, hissing as it sought targets. New knowledge flooded him. This arm could inject a paralytic toxin, but it burned with aggressive instinct, straining against his control. The beastmen hesitated, sensing the change. Leo seized the moment. With his right stone grip arm, he hurled a beastman aside, then lunged forward, his new viper-strike arm striking like a cobra. It pierced a beastman's shoulder, injecting toxin. The creature stiffened mid-roar, collapsing paralyzed. Leo fought through the pain and the arm's wild urges, using it strategically, a flick here to disable a claw, a strike there to drop a charger. Each paralysis thinned the horde, but the shaman remained, his chanting growing louder. Through his crystal eyes, Leo saw the shaman gathering violet energy into a bolt aimed at Dusthaven's heart. The villagers were holding, but a direct hit would break them. Gritting his teeth, Leo activated his earth anchor legs fully, rooting himself to the ground. Mana surged from the earth, stabilizing him but locking him in place. He inhaled, his gale breath lungs expanding with a sound like bellows. Then he exhaled, a torrent of purified air that cut through the battle haze, striking the shaman's forming spell. The violet energy dissipated with a hiss, and the shaman staggered, his concentration broken. Weakness washed over Leo, his throat burning as if scalded. But he had an opening. With a roar, he tore his legs from the ground, earth crumbling around him, and charged. Beastmen tried to intercept, but his viper-strike arm lashed out, paralyzing too, while his carapace shield took the brunt of their attacks. He reached the shaman just as the creature raised its staff again. Their eyes met, crystalline blue versus violet malice. The shaman spat words in a guttural tongue, "You are a blight. We cleanse blights." Leo didn't answer. His viper-strike arm struck, not at the body, but at the staff, shattering it. The shaman gasped, his connection to the violet energy severed. Before he could react, Leo's stone grip arm grabbed his throat, lifting him off the ground. The viper-strike arm hovered at his chest, fang dripping. "Tell them to retreat," Leo growled, his voice raw from the gale breath. The shaman choked out a command in the beastmen tongue. The horde faltered, seeing their leader captured. Leo tightened his grip. Now. With a final, grudging snarl, the shaman barked an order. The beastmen began to fall back, dragging their paralyzed comrades. Leo dropped the shaman, who scrambled away, casting one last hate-filled glance before disappearing into the forest with his retreating army. Silence fell over Dusthaven, broken only by the moans of wounded villagers and Leo's labored breathing. His viper-strike arm twitched uncontrollably, trying to strike at nothing. He forced it to his side, sweat beading on his brow from the effort of restraint. Around him, the villagers stared, not at the retreating enemy, but at him. Their faces held no relief, only a deeper horror at his new limb, which coiled and uncoiled like a living thing. Eldrin approached cautiously, his spear lowered. "My lord, your arm." Before Leo could respond, a new sound came from the western swamps, a series of clicks and hisses. From the misty wetlands, figures emerged, humanoid but scaled, with elongated snouts and tails that swished through the mud. Lizard folk. They moved with a graceful, predatory ease, their eyes reflecting the dull light. At their head stood a taller individual, scales patterned in shades of bronze and jade, who carried a trident of polished bone. The lizard folk leader stopped a respectful distance away, bowing its head slightly. Its voice was a sibilant whisper, yet clear. "Great mutation. We have watched. You fight like the scaled ones. You change like the scaled ones. We offer alliance. The swamp dwellers see kin in you." Leo's viper-strike arm hissed in response, as if recognizing kindred spirits. The villagers tensed, weapons half-raised. Leo met the lizardfolk's gaze, his crystal eyes seeing their energy, a cool, adaptive blue, with no hint of the violet malice. They were outcasts, like him. And they called him, Great Mutation. He nodded slowly, his body aching with mutations old and new. "We'll talk." As the lizard folk settled at the edge of the swamp, and the villagers began tending wounds, Leo looked at his kingdom, the walls holding, the people alive, but his own form further twisted. The viper-strike arm coiled around his waist, a permanent reminder that every victory came with a price written in his flesh. The beastmen were gone, but the shaman's words echoed, abomination, and now, the lizard folk saw him as one of their own. What did that make him? The morning after the beastmen retreated, Dusthaven's air still carried the metallic tang of blood and the lingering musk of reptilian scales. Leo stood at the edge of the village's newly reinforced palisade, his left arm, the viper-strike arm, twitching restlessly at his side. The serpentine limb, covered in dark, overlapping scales, seemed to have a mind of its own, its venom-tipped fingers curling and uncurling as if tasting the wind. Across from him, a dozen lizard folk waited, their leader a hulking figure with moss-green scales and intelligent amber eyes. "I am Kethrax," the lizard man rumbled, his voice a low hiss that carried over the morning mist. "We watched your battle. Saw your transformations." Leo kept his right hand, the stone grip arm, visible, its petrified wood texture stark against his increasingly patchwork skin. "Why approach now?" Kethrax's forked tongue flickered. "Your mutations mark you as kin. Not human, not beast. Like us." He gestured to his own people. One had chitinous plates growing along her spine like natural armor. Another's eyes glowed with faint bioluminescence. "We are hunted by men who call us abominations. Our swamp home was burned by the Baron's men moons ago. We seek refuge." Leo's resource-side eyes, the crystalline orbs that had replaced his human eyes, scanned the lizard folk. They showed no magical deception, only raw survival energy tinged with desperation. He remembered the villagers' terrified faces when he'd used his gale breath lungs to purge the plague, how they'd recoiled from the bellows-like sound of his exhalations. Now he had a viper for an arm and root-like earth anchor legs that sometimes rooted him to the ground when he drew too deeply on mana. Adding lizard folk to Dusthaven would deepen that fear. But he needed allies. The beastmen shaman was dead, but Finn's report of Baron Valerius's assassination meant political chaos. And the shaman had sensed Leo's mutations, others might, too. "You can stay," Leo said, his voice raspy from the chronic inflammation left by his gale breath lungs. "But you work. We're building a kingdom here, not a refuge." Kethrax bowed his head, scales rustling. "We are builders. Hunters. Our mutations give us strength in water, in darkness. We will serve." Over the next week, Leo integrated the lizard folk. They settled in the damp area near the new aqueduct, constructing reed huts that blended with the landscape. The villagers watched with a mixture of curiosity and horror. Eldrin, the older peasant, muttered about scaly demons while hauling water. Mara kept her child close, though Kale, the younger man, seemed fascinated by their natural weapons. The lizard folk proved invaluable. Their webbed hands and ability to hold their breath for minutes made them perfect for maintaining the aqueduct's underwater filters. Their night vision allowed them to guard the palisade after dark, reducing the strain on human sentries. And they treated Leo not with fear, but with a reverent curiosity, touching his mutations with scaled fingers as if studying sacred texts. One evening, as Leo oversaw the expansion of the village's granary, now needed to feed both humans and lizard folk, a familiar pressure built in his bones. It was the same sensation he'd felt when Dusthaven leveled up to trading hamlet, to sanitary village, to defensive hamlet. The kingdom's symbiosis system, linking his body to his land's growth, was activating again. He stumbled away from the construction site, his earth anchor legs digging into the soil as if seeking stability. The system's voice echoed in his mind, cold and mechanical, * cultural expansion detected. Integration of non-human species. Dusthaven advances to diverse settlement, level 7, *. Pain erupted across his skin. Not the sharp agony of bone restructuring, but a creeping, electric tingle that spread from his neck down his arms, across his chest. He tore off his tunic, watching in horrified fascination as patterns emerged on his flesh, swirling lines of faint blue light that pulsed with his heartbeat. They shifted as he moved, turning green when he stood near foliage, gray against stone, nearly invisible in shadow. * mutation acquired, glow skin camouflage. Skin produces bioluminescent patterns that adapt to surroundings, enabling stealth or intimidation. Side effect, attracts nocturnal predators sensitive to magical light, *. Leo gasped, his viper strike arm thrashing as if enraged by the new transformation. The patterns glowed brighter, then dimmed as he focused on calming himself. He could feel them responding to his will. When he thought of hiding, they muted to match the twilight. When he imagined confrontation, they flared in angry reds and oranges. That night, the side effect manifested. Howls echoed from the forest, not wolves, but something with a higher, more intelligent pitch. Glowing eyes appeared beyond the palisade, night stalkers, panther-like creatures drawn to magical energy. The lizard folk's natural mutations allowed them to sense the predators early. Kethrax rallied his people, their own bioluminescent markings flaring in warning as they fought alongside human guards. Leo used his glow-skin camouflage to blend into the shadows, his viper strike arm striking from darkness to inject paralytic venom into a night stalker's flank. The battle was short but brutal, leaving 2 lizard folk wounded and 1 night stalker corpse steaming in the moonlight. Afterward, Kethrax approached Leo. "Your glow skin is like our swamplights," he said, pointing to his own faintly glowing scout. "But stronger. It calls predators, yes. But it could also hide you." An idea formed in Leo's mind. If his skin could adapt to surroundings, he could infiltrate. Finn had reported sightings of scouts in noble garb, likely from rival lords probing Dusthaven's defenses. With Baron Valerius dead, the region was a power vacuum. Leo needed information. 3 nights later, he slipped past the palisade alone. His glow-skin camouflage rendered him nearly invisible in the moonlit forest, patterns shifting to mimic bark and leaf shadow. His earth anchor legs drew mana from the soil, giving him endurance, though he had to be careful not to root himself. His viper strike arm he kept wrapped in dark cloth, its twitching subdued by focus. He found the camp 2 miles east, a collection of tents bearing the crest of Lord Corvin, a minor noble known for his expansionist ambitions. Leo's resource sight eyes pierced the darkness, revealing guards patrolling lazily. Using his camouflage, he crept to the command tent, his skin fading to match the canvas. Inside, 2 men spoke by lamplight. "Valerius's death leaves the territory open," said a sharp-faced commander. "But that mutant in Dusthaven is gathering freaks. Lizard folk now. The church calls it heresy." The other, a scribe, unrolled a map. "Lord Corvin has allied with Lady Selene and Lord Balthus. Their combined forces will crush Dusthaven in a fortnight. The mutant lord's abominations are the pretext." Leo's breath caught. A coalition of 3 lords. His mutations, meant to protect his people, were becoming the very reason for their destruction. He waited until the men left for a patrol check, then slipped inside. His stone grip arm made no sound as he lifted papers. There, invasion plans. Troop numbers, routes, a date circled in red ink. He tucked them into his tunic, his glowskin flaring with adrenaline before he forced it back to stealth mode. He escaped as dawn tinged the sky, returning to Dusthaven as the village stirred. In his hut, he spread the stolen plans. The numbers were daunting, 300 soldiers, cavalry, and siege engines. Against Dusthaven's 80 humans and 20 lizard folk, it was annihilation. He called a council, Kethrax, Eldrin, Mara, and Finn. When he revealed the plans, Eldrin paled. "We cannot fight 3 lords. They will burn us all." Kethrax hissed, scales rising. "We will fight. Your mutations and ours, we are stronger than they know." But Mara's eyes were on Leo, on his glowing skin and serpentine arm. "Every time you change, my lord, you save us. But you become less human. And now they come because of what you are." Her words hung in the air. Leo looked at his reflection in a water basin, a man with crystal eyes, a petrified arm, root-like legs, glowing skin, and a viper for a left hand. The kingdom grew, and he became more monstrous. The lizard folk's loyalty was a bomb, but the human villagers' fear was a chasm widening with each mutation. As the council dissolved into worried murmurs, Leo stared at the invasion date. A fortnight. Time to prepare, to fortify, to use every mutation and modern engineering trick he knew. But the stolen plans contained one more detail, scrawled in a margin, asterisk: "The church has sent an inquisitor. He arrives to purify the abominations before the army marches, asterisk." The cliffhanger settled like a stone in Leo's gut. Not just an army, but a fanatic hunting him specifically. He touched his glowing skin, the patterns pulsing with his anxiety. Dusthaven was level 7, diverse and growing. But the price was written on his body, and now it would be paid in blood. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dusthaven's newly expanded palisade walls, the wood still fresh with the scent of pine resin. Leo stood at the edge of the village square, his mutated form casting a grotesque silhouette against the dawn. His left arm, the viper strike arm, twitched restlessly, the serpentine scales glinting with venomous moisture. His right arm, petrified into the stone grip arm, felt heavy as granite, yet thrummed with the memory of last night's labor. "We have 10 days, Leo announced, his voice raspy from the chronic inflammation of his gale breath lungs. The villagers, human and lizard folk alike, gathered before him, their faces etched with fear and determination. "The coalition marches. We must be ready." He turned to the makeshift forge he'd constructed over the past week. Using his engineering knowledge from another world, Leo had designed a series of ballistae, massive crossbow-like weapons capable of piercing armor at 200 yards. But blueprints were useless without steel and sinew. Eldrin, Mara, Kale, gather every scrap of metal, Leo ordered, his earth anchor legs rooting slightly into the soil as he drew mana to bolster his stamina. The villagers scattered, their movements quickened by the urgency in his hissing tone. Leo approached the forge's central anvil. With his stone grip arm, he lifted a chunk of raw iron ore that would have taken 3 men to move. The petrified wood of his arm didn't just provide strength, it conducted heat differently, allowing him to handle white-hot metal without burning. He slammed the ore onto the anvil, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Joran, pump the bellows. Leo commanded. The laborer nodded, his muscles straining as he worked the leather apparatus. Flames roared to life in the forge pit, casting an orange glow across Leo's chitinous plating and bioluminescent skin patterns. The glow skin camouflage flickered unconsciously, shifting from earthy browns to forge fire oranges. For 3 days and nights, the rhythmic clang of hammer on steel became Dusthaven's heartbeat. Leo worked without rest, his mutations granting him unnatural endurance. His resource-sight eyes scanned each ingot for impurities, his stone grip arm shaping metal with precision no blacksmith could match. When fatigue threatened, he activated his earth anchor legs, drawing mana from the soil to sustain himself, though it rooted him to the spot until he released the connection. By the 4th day, 6 ballistae stood completed along the western wall, the direction from which intelligence suggested the coalition would attack. Each weapon stood 8 feet tall, with arms of tensioned yew and bolts tipped with Leo's forged steel. The lizard folk, under Kethrax's direction, had woven camouflage netting from swamp reeds, making the weapons nearly invisible against the forest backdrop. My lord, Kethrax approached, his scaled skin glistening in the midday sun. The lizard folk leader's own mutations, extra rows of teeth and vestigial dorsal spines, made him appear almost regal in his otherness. The armory is complete. We have 300 spears, 200 arrows, and 50 swords. More than we have hands to wield them. Leo nodded, wiping sweat from his brow with his normal hand. The motion felt strange, a reminder of the humanity he was losing piece by piece. Good. Show me. They walked to the newly constructed armory, a stone and timber building Leo had designed with reinforced walls and a thatched roof. Inside, weapons gleamed in organized racks. The air smelled of oiled metal and fresh wood. As Leo stepped across the threshold, a familiar sensation washed over him, the tingling precursor to a level up. The kingdom's Symbiosis System's notification appeared in his mind's eye, glowing with ethereal light. Settlement advancement. Dusthaven has achieved, fortified outpost, level 8. Requirements met, defensive infrastructure complete, military production established, population diversity maintained. Mutation triggered. Random selection, tongue transformation. Pain exploded in Leo's mouth, a white-hot agony that made his previous mutations feel like mild discomfort. He dropped to his knees, his viper strike arm thrashing uncontrollably, nearly striking Kethrax. The lizard folk leader jumped back, his eyes wide with alarm. Leo's jaw felt like it was being pried open by invisible hands. His tongue, that ordinary muscle of speech and taste, began to lengthen, to split at the tip, to develop tiny sensory nodules along its surface. He could feel each individual change, the cartilage forming a flexible core, the nerve endings multiplying exponentially, the taste buds transforming into something far more sophisticated. When the pain finally subsided, Leo remained on the ground, panting. His mouth felt foreign. He tentatively extended his new tongue. It emerged nearly a foot long, forked like a serpent's, shimmering with iridescent colors that matched his glow-skin camouflage. Tiny, hair-like sensors covered its surface, vibrating with sensory input. Leo could taste the air itself, the iron tang of weapons, the earthy musk of lizard folk, the faint sweetness of pine resin from the walls. But more than taste, he could sense truth. As Kethrax helped him to his feet, Leo's new tongue flickered unconsciously. And with that flicker came a cascade of information. Kethrax's loyalty was genuine, tinged with the metallic flavor of earnest devotion. But beneath it, Leo tasted something else, a sour note of anxiety, a bitter undertone of deception. "Are you well, great mutation?" Kethrax asked, his voice concerned. Leo tried to speak, but his words emerged as a sibilant hiss. "Yes. I am changed." The truth-tasting organ had altered his vocal cords, rendering his speech serpentine. He would need to practice to make himself understood. Over the next 2 days, Leo tested his new mutation, the truth-taste tongue. He discovered it could detect lies with uncanny accuracy, each falsehood carrying a distinct chemical signature he could interpret. It could identify poisons in food or drink. It could even sense emotional states through pheromones and subtle body chemicals. But it came with costs. The constant sensory input gave him headaches. Eating became a complex experience of overwhelming flavors. And his speech, already altered by his gale breath lungs, now carried a reptilian quality that made villagers flinch. On the 6th day after the armory's completion, sabotage struck. Leo was inspecting the ballistae when his truth-taste tongue detected something wrong. He flicked it toward the nearest weapon, tasting the air around it. Beneath the sense of wood and steel, he detected the acrid tang of tampered mechanisms. Someone had filed down the locking pins that held the tension arms in place. If fired, the ballista would explode backward, killing its crew. Check them all, Leo hissed to Kale, who had become his de facto lieutenant among the human villagers. 3 more weapons had been sabotaged. The work was subtle, done by someone who knew engineering. Someone with access to the armory. Someone who moved freely between human and lizard folk areas. That evening, Leo gathered his inner circle in the village hall, Kethrax, Eldrin, Mara, and Joran. His truth-taste tongue flickered constantly, sampling the emotional cocktail in the room. The sabotage was professional, Leo said, forcing his serpentine speech to be as clear as possible. Someone here has betrayed us. Eldrin's anxiety tasted like copper pennies. Mara's fear was the flavor of cold brine. Joran's confusion had the texture of chalk dust. But Kethrax's emotional signature was complex. Loyalty, yes. But beneath it, Leo tasted the distinct chemical signature of a lie being maintained, a cloying sweetness masking something bitter. My people are loyal, Kethrax said, his voice steady. We have sworn to defend Dusthaven as our new home. Truth. But incomplete truth. Leo's tongue flickered again, probing deeper. Are all your people loyal, Kethrax? Every single one. The lizard folk leader hesitated. That hesitation carried flavor, the sour note of withheld information. We are 37 in number. I cannot read every heart. But you suspect something, Leo pressed, his forked tongue tasting the air between them. Don't you? Kethrax's scales seemed to darken. There is, one. A young male named isekai'd. He joined us just before we came to Dusthaven. He speaks little, keeps to himself. But he has skills, metalworking, trap-making. Where is he now? Guarding the eastern palisade with 2 of my warriors. Leo moved with sudden purpose, his earth anchor legs carrying him across the village square faster than a normal man could run. Kethrax and the others followed. As they approached the eastern wall, Leo's truth-taste tongue detected it first, the chemical signature of guilt, sharp as vinegar. isekai'd stood at his post, appearing no different from the other lizard folk guards. But as Leo approached, the young male's posture tightened. His hand drifted toward a dagger at his belt. isekai'd, Leo hissed, his tongue flickering. Step forward. The lizard folk complied, but Leo tasted the lie in his obedience, a cloying, artificial sweetness. Did you sabotage the ballistae? Leo asked directly. No, great mutation, isekai'd replied. Lie. The taste was unmistakable, a chemical cascade that Leo's mutated tongue interpreted as deception. Who sent you? Leo pressed, his viper strike arm twitching with the urge to strike. isekai'd's eyes darted toward the forest beyond the wall. No one. I am loyal to Dusthaven. Another lie, stronger this time. Leo's tongue detected something else now, fear, but not of him. Fear of someone else. Someone waiting beyond the walls. Kethrax, search him, Leo ordered. As the lizard folk leader approached, isekai'd made his move. He drew his dagger and lunged, not at Leo, but at the nearby rope mechanism that controlled the eastern gate. If cut, the gate would drop open, leaving Dusthaven vulnerable. Leo didn't think. He activated his viper strike arm. The serpentine limb shot forward with whip-crack speed, its fanged tip sinking into isekai'd's shoulder. Paralytic venom pumped into the traitor's bloodstream. isekai'd stiffened, his dagger falling from nerveless fingers as he collapsed. A search of his belongings revealed a coded message hidden in a hollowed-out water gourd. Leo's resource sight eyes deciphered the simple substitution cipher, sabotage defenses. Signal with fire when complete. Payment upon verification. It was signed with a symbol, a stylized tower that matched the heraldry of Lord Corvin, one of the 3 coalition leaders. Kethrax looked devastated. I failed you, great mutation. I brought a viper into our nest. Leo placed his stone grip arm on the lizard folk leader's shoulder. The gesture was meant to be reassuring, but the petrified would felt cold and unyielding. You brought me the truth when pressed. That is loyalty. The fault lies with Corvin's coin. He turned to the paralyzed isekai'd. The traitor's eyes were wide with terror, his body frozen by the venom. When he can speak again, interrogate him. Learn everything about Corvin's plants. As night fell on the 7th day, Leo stood atop the watchtower, his mutated form silhouetted against the moon. His truth-taste tongue flickered, sampling the night air. He could taste the fear in his village, human and lizard folk alike. But beneath it, he tasted something new, unity forged through shared threat. The discovery of the spy had paradoxically strengthened bonds, as both groups realized the enemy sought to destroy them all. Then, as the moon reached its zenith, a horn sounded from the forest edge. A single rider emerged from the trees, carrying a banner of truce. Leo descended from the watchtower, his earth anchor legs carrying him to the gate. The rider was a man in polished armor, his face hidden behind a visor. Message for the mutant lord of Dusthaven, the rider called out, his voice carrying across the silent night. Leo stepped forward, his mutations on full display, petrified arm, serpentine arm, chitinous plating, glowing skin, and now the flickering, forked tongue that emerged as he spoke. I am Leo. Deliver your message. The rider didn't flinch, but Leo's truth-taste tongue detected the fear in him, the acrid flavor of a man facing something he didn't understand. By order of the coalition of 3, Lords Corvin, Selene, and Baldus, you are hereby given ultimatum, the rider announced, unrolling a scroll. Surrender yourself and your settlement within 10 days. Abandon your heretical mutations. Submit to purification by the Church Inquisitor. If you comply, your people will be spared and relocated. The rider paused, his eyes meeting Leo's through the visor. If you refuse. He didn't need to finish. The implication hung in the air, bitter as poison on Leo's truth-tasting tongue. What is the alternative? Leo asked, his voice a serpentine hiss. Annihilation, the rider said simply. Every stone of Dusthaven will be cast down. Every mutant, lizard folk or otherwise, will be purged. And you, Lord Leo, will be burned at the stake as an example to any who would defy natural order. Leo's truth-taste tongue flickered. The rider believed every word. There would be no negotiation, no mercy. You have 10 days, the rider said, re-rolling the scroll. The coalition marches on the 11th dawn. He turned his horse and rode back into the forest, leaving Leo standing before the gates of Dusthaven. The ultimatum hung in the air like a death sentence. 10 days to prepare. 10 days to fortify. 10 days before 3 armies descended upon them. Leo looked back at his village, at the ballistae on the walls, at the armory full of weapons, at the faces of humans and lizard folk peering from doorways and windows. They were watching him. Waiting for his response. He extended his truth-taste tongue, sampling the night air one more time. Beneath the fear, beneath the anxiety, he tasted something else now, defiance. The flavor of a people who would not surrender. The scent of a home worth defending. 10 days. Leo turned and walked back through the gates. His mutations marked each step, the heavy thud of his earth anchor legs, the silent glide of his serpentine arm, the faint glow of his camouflaged skin. He was becoming more monster than man with each passing day. But sometimes, he thought as the gates closed behind him, monsters were exactly what a world like this needed. Dawn broke over Dusthaven in a wash of crimson light, painting the wooden palisades in shades of blood. Leo stood atop the watchtower, his mutated body a silhouette against the rising sun. The stone grip arm clenched the railing, splintering the wood. His earth anchor legs were already partially rooted, drawing mana from the fortified ground beneath him. The air tasted of ozone and fear. From the eastern tree line, they emerged. The coalition army flowed across the plains like a metallic tide, 500 strong against Dusthaven's 100 defenders. Banners of 3 houses snapped in the wind, Lord Corvin's black raven on crimson, Lady Selene's silver moon on indigo, and Lord Balthus's golden lion on emerald. At their forefront marched robed figures with staffs glowing with gathered energy. Mages. They're not waiting for the 10 days, Leo hissed through his truth-taste tongue, the serpentine organ flicking out to sample the air. It detected no deception in their formation, only pure, focused intent to destroy. Below, Kethrak stood with his lizardfolk warriors, their scales glinting dully. The human villagers manned the newly constructed ballistae, their faces pale but determined. Eldrin worked the winch on the eastern wall, his old hands steady. Mara had taken the children to the central granary, now serving as an emergency shelter. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew this was survival. Fire at will when they're in range. Leo's voice carried over the walls, though the hiss of his truth-taste tongue made some villagers flinch. Aim for the mages first. The first magical assault came not as fireballs, but as a rolling bank of enchanted fog that billowed from the mages' staves. It swallowed the advancing infantry whole, rendering them invisible while the fog itself thickened into a corrosive mist that began eating at the wooden fortifications. Where it touched, wood blackened and splintered. They're trying to blind us and dissolve the walls simultaneously. Kale shouted from below, already coughing as tendrils of fog crept over the palisade. Leo's resource sight eyes activated instinctively, the crystalline lenses refracting light to pierce the magical obscurement. He could see the infantry advancing beneath the cover, their movements coordinated, their shields interlocked. But the fog was the immediate threat. His mind raced through his mutations. Stone Grip Arm could reinforce a section of wall, but not all of it. Viper Strike Arm could poison a few, but not hundreds. Then he remembered, the Gale Breath Lungs. He took position at the center of the northern wall, where the fog was thickest. Drawing a deep, shuddering breath, he felt the mutation in his chest expand, the specialized organs within vibrating with stored atmospheric energy. He exhaled. The resulting gale tore from his lips with the force of a storm front. It ripped through the magical fog, shredding the enchantment into dissipating wisps. The infantry beneath were suddenly exposed, their formation broken by the unexpected wind. Several stumbled, their shields clattering. The corrosive mist vanished, though sections of the palisade now bore blackened scars. Ballistae, now! Leo roared. Twang thump. Twang thump. The heavy siege weapons fired, their iron-tipped bolts streaking across the field. One caught a mage through the chest, pinning him to the ground. Another shattered a shield wall. But there were too many. The infantry reformed and began their advance in earnest, scaling ladders appearing among their ranks. Magic flared again, this time, fiery projectiles arced toward the walls. Leo raised his carapace shield, the chitinous plating extending from his forearm to form a barrier large enough to cover 3 villagers beside him. A fireball impacted with a concussive whump, heat washing over them. The shield held, though the chitin smoked. They're at the walls. Joran shouted from the eastern section, already swinging an axe at the first climber. Leo moved along the battlements, his earth anchor legs allowing him to plant and pivot with unnatural stability. Wherever he went, his carapace shield deflected magical attacks, his stone grip arm hurled back scaling ladders, and his viper strike arm darted out to inject paralytic venom into any soldier who breached the defenses. The serpentine limb moved with a mind of its own, striking with predatory precision. One climber, a burly man in Corvin's colors, managed to swing a sword at Leo's head. The viper strike arm intercepted mid-swing, fangs sinking into the man's wrist. He stiffened, toppling backward off the ladder. But for every soldier felled, 2 more took their place. The sheer weight of numbers began to tell. A section of the southern palisade, weakened by the earlier corrosive fog, groaned under the press of bodies. Leo saw it through his resource-sight eyes, the structural stress points glowing amber in his vision. Kethrax, reinforced the south wall. Use your weight. Leo commanded. The lizardfolk leader bellowed an order in his guttural tongue, and a dozen of his warriors rushed to brace the failing section, their clawed feet digging into the earth, their scaled shoulders pressing against the shuddering timbers. In that moment of desperate defense, Leo felt it, a familiar, unsettling surge in his core. The kingdom's symbiosis system thrummed to life, vibrations resonating through his mutated body and into the very soil of Dusthaven. The settlement was leveling up again. Defensive successes, repelled assaults, coordinated protection, the integration of lizardfolk tactics, had pushed fortified outposts to the next threshold. No, not now, he thought, even as the transformation seized him. It started in his feet. The earth anchor legs, already rooted and drawing mana, began to reshape. The root-like structures retracted, the flesh and bone contorting with audible cracks. His boots split apart as new forms emerged, clawed, avian talons, each digit ending in a curved, razor-sharp keratin blade. The mutation crawled up to his ankles, then his calves, leaving his lower legs covered in sleek, featherless skin patterned like bird-of-prey scales. Sky-rend talons. Leo gasped as new instincts flooded his mind. The talons could grip with crushing force, yes, but they also contained coiled tendons meant for launching. For flight. He tested it without thinking, bending his new legs and pushing off from the battlement. The launch was explosive. He shot upward, the ground falling away beneath him. For 3 glorious seconds, he was airborne, soaring over the battlefield on short, powerful bursts of unnatural lift. The sensation was dizzying, wind rushing past his glow-skin camouflage, which had activated in response to the sudden movement, making his bioluminescent patterns flare in panicked blues and greens. He landed not on the wall, but amid the enemy's rear lines, directly where the coalition commanders were observing from horseback. His talons struck the earth first, tearing deep gouges in the soil and throwing up clods of dirt. The impact jarred through his legs, but he was already moving. Lord Corvin, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and ornate plate armor, stared in shock. Leo didn't give him time to react. The Viper Strike arm lashed out, not to inject venom, but to wrap around the Lord's throat and yank him from his saddle. At the same time, Leo's stone grip arm seized the banner of the Black Raven, snapping the pole with a crunch. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards surged forward, but Leo used his gale breath lungs again, exhaling a concentrated blast that knocked the first rank off their feet. He saw Lady Selene, her face pale beneath a silver helm, shouting orders to her mages. Lord Balthus was already wheeling his horse to retreat. "Your siege ends here." Leo bellowed, his voice a distorted mix of human speech and serpentine hiss. He threw Corvin to the ground, the Lord gasping for air. "Withdraw, or lose your commanders." But even as he spoke, he felt the limitations of the new mutation. The sky-rend talons were already aching, the tendons strained from the short flight and hard landing. He couldn't launch again, not without risking permanent damage. And he was deep in enemy territory, surrounded. He began to back toward Dusthaven's walls, dragging Corvin as a hostage. The coalition soldiers hesitated, their advance stalling without clear leadership. On the walls, Kethrak saw the opportunity and ordered a volley of javelins from the lizard folk, forcing the encircling troops to raise their shields. It was then that Lord Balthus, having retreated to a safe distance, raised a hand. Not in surrender, but in signal. From the rear of the coalition army, a covered wagon was pushed forward. The canvas was torn away, revealing a massive, crystalline orb within which something shifted, a form of swirling stone and molten earth. A mage beside it began an incantation, and the orb cracked open. What emerged was not flesh, but elemental force given shape. 12 feet tall, composed of compacted soil, jagged rocks, and veins of glowing magma, the bound earth elemental turned its faceless head toward Dusthaven. Where it stepped, the ground trembled. It raised a fist the size of a cart, and the very air hummed with gathering geological power. "You think mutations are heresy?" Balthus shouted, his voice carrying over the sudden silence. "Behold true power, purified and bound. Crush the walls. Crush the abomination." The elemental lumbered forward, each step sinking deep into the earth. It reached the weakened southern section of the palisade, the section still braced by Kethrax and his lizard folk. Without pause, it swung its stone fist. The impact sounded like a mountain breaking. Wood shattered. Lizard folk were thrown like ragdolls. Kethrax was hurled backward, crashing into the inner stockade. A gaping hole now yawned in Dusthaven's defenses, and through it, the coalition infantry began to pour. Leo stood between the broken wall and the advancing horde, his hostage forgotten, his talons rooted in the torn earth. The sky-rend talons throbbed with pain. His other mutations felt stretched thin. Before him, the earth elemental turned, its magma veins pulsing with intent. Behind him, his people, human and lizard folk alike, scrambled to form a desperate last line. The siege had not ended. It had just become a slaughter. The world dissolved into chaos. Dust and shattered stone erupted in a geyser as the earth elemental's massive fist punched through the southern wall of Dusthaven. Leo felt the impact through his earth anchor legs, a seismic tremor that rattled his bones and sent villagers screaming. Through the gaping hole, he saw the elementals form, a hulking construct of packed soil and jagged rock, standing 3 times a man's height, with glowing fissures of amber energy tracing its body like veins. "To the breach!" Leo roared, his voice a gravelly rasp that barely sounded human anymore. His body protested every movement. The stone grip arm hung heavy at his side, petrified would fuse to flesh. His sky-rend talons, freshly mutated from the siege, throbbed with each step, the avian claws tearing furrows in the packed earth of the courtyard. He could still feel the strain from his brief flight, the tendons in his feet screaming in protest. But he couldn't stop. Through the dust cloud, he saw coalition infantry pouring through the breach, their armor glinting in the afternoon sun. "Kale! Hold the line with the lizard folk!" Leo shouted, his truth-taste tongue flicking out to taste the air. The metallic tang of fear, the acrid bite of magic, the sour note of betrayal, it all washed over him in a sensory flood. "Joran, get those ballistae turned. Aim for the elemental's joints." He pushed forward, his carapace shield raised. A fireball from one of Lord Balthasar's mages splashed against the chitinous plating, heat washing over him. He barely flinched. His resource sight eyes scanned the battlefield, picking out weaknesses in the elemental's form, fracture lines where the magical bindings were weakest. Then the elemental turned its attention to him. It wasn't a creature of intelligence, not truly. It was a force of nature given crude purpose, bound earth animated by magecraft. But in that moment, as its glowing amber eyes fixed on Leo, he felt something deeper. A resonance. His earth anchor legs, rooted to the ground, drew mana from the soil. They always had. But now, facing this creature of pure earth magic, the connection intensified. He could feel the land's pain, the torn soil, the shattered stone, the violated earth. "My lord!" Eldrin's voice cut through the din. The older peasant was dragging a wounded villager to safety, his face pale with terror. "The wall, it's collapsing further." Leo didn't answer. He was sinking. Literally. His earth anchor legs had activated fully, roots digging deep into the ground, anchoring him. But this was different. He wasn't just drawing mana, he was merging. The soil whispered to him. The stones sang. He could feel every footprint on Dusthaven's land, every planted seed, every drop of blood spilled on its soil. And he could feel the elemental's core, a pulsing knot of geomancy buried deep in its chest. The kingdom's symbiosis system flared in his vision, golden text scrolling past. Settlement bond intensifying. Deeply connected to the land. Symbiosis at critical levels. Then, a notification he'd seen 9 times before, each more terrifying than the last. Dusthaven has advanced to level 10, geomantic city-state. No. Not now. The pain hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. It wasn't the sharp agony of broken bones or torn flesh. This was deeper. Slower. More profound. His heart, the actual organ beating in his chest, felt like it was crystallizing. He gasped, clutching at his sternum. Through his glow-skin camouflage, which had instinctively activated in patterns of panic red and warning yellow, he saw a light beginning to glow from within his ribcage. What's happening to him? Mara screamed from somewhere behind the barricades, her child clutched to her chest. Kethrax the lizardfolk leader hissed, his own natural scales glinting. The land claims its lord. Leo fell to his knees. His sky-wren talons dug deep, anchoring him further. He could feel the transformation happening in real time. His heart wasn't just changing, it was being replaced. Muscle tissue hardened into faceted crystal. Chambers reconfigured into geometric patterns. Blood vessels transformed into glowing channels of amber energy that matched the elemental's fissures. When it was done, he had a new mutation, the Terracore heart. It pulsed in his chest with a steady, geological rhythm. Not the frantic beat of a mammalian heart, but the slow, inevitable thrum of tectonic plates shifting. Power flooded him, pure geomancy. He could feel the weight of mountains, the patience of bedrock, the memory of continents. The elemental swung again, this time aiming directly for him. Leo didn't raise his carapace shield. Instead, he reached out with his stone grip arm, not to block, but to connect. His petrified wood fingers touched the elemental's rocky fist. And he understood. The elemental wasn't an enemy. Not really. It was earth magic forced into servitude, bound by Lord Balthasar's mages. Its rage was the land's rage at being violated. Its violence was the violence done to it. "I'm sorry," Leo whispered, his truth-taste tongue tasting the truth of his own words. Then he pushed. Not with physical strength, though his stone grip arm had plenty. He pushed with the Terracore heart. Geomancy flowed from him into the elemental. He didn't try to destroy it. He tried to calm it. To soothe the violated earth. To show it that he, too, was part of the land now. The elemental froze. Its glowing amber eyes dimmed, then shifted color, from angry orange to curious gold. The fissures in its body pulsed in time with Leo's crystalline heart. Impossible, Lord Balthasar's voice carried from the coalition lines. The binding should be absolute. Leo stood, his sky-wren talons lifting him from the ground. The roots of his earth anchor legs retracted slightly, giving him mobility. He placed both hands, one petrified wood, one human flesh now traced with glowing amber veins, against the elemental's chest, right where he'd sensed its core. "Be free," he said. And he shattered the binding. Not with brute force. With precision. His resource sight eyes showed him every magical thread, every rune, every knot of energy holding the elemental together. His truth-taste tongue tasted the falsehood of forced servitude. And his terracore heart, his heart resonated with the elemental's core until their rhythms matched perfectly. The elemental didn't explode. It didn't collapse. It simply dissolved. The packed soil softened into fertile earth. The jagged rock settled into a natural formation. The glowing amber energy dissipated into the ground, enriching it. Where a monster had stood, now there was only a patch of exceptionally rich soil, already sprouting tiny green shoots. Silence fell over the battlefield. Then chaos erupted, but not the chaos of battle. The coalition infantry, seeing their secret weapon vanish, broke. Lords Corvin, Selene, and Balthus shouted orders that went unheeded. Their lines crumbled. Dusthaven's defenders, human and lizard folk alike, pressed the advantage, driving the invaders back through the breach and beyond the walls. Leo didn't join the pursuit. He stood in the courtyard, one hand pressed to his chest. Through the translucent patches of his glow-skin camouflage, he could see it, his terracore heart, glowing with soft amber light, visible through skin and bone. It pulsed with that slow, geological rhythm. When he breathed, tiny crystals of earth magic formed in the air around him, glittering like diamond dust before settling to the ground. "My lord." Kale approached cautiously, sword still in hand. "Are you alive?" Leo finished for him. His voice had changed again. Deeper. Resonant. Like stones grinding together deep underground. "The settlement?" "Advanced," Eldrin said, wonder in his voice. The older peasant was staring at the patch of enriched soil where the elemental had been. The system announced it. Geomantic city-state. Dusthaven is a city now. And it was. Leo could feel it through his terracore heart. The boundaries had expanded. The population had grown, not just in numbers, but in diversity. Human and lizard folk, living together. The infrastructure solidified, proper stone buildings replacing wooden huts, paved streets radiating from a central plaza, defensive walls that were now truly city walls. And beneath it all, the land itself was changing. Richer. More alive. More connected to him. Victory celebrations lasted 3 days. The coalition army had retreated in disarray, their lords humiliated. Dusthaven City, had survived. Leo's mutations had saved them all, again. But as villagers feasted and lizard folk performed rituals of gratitude, Leo noticed the looks. The human villagers didn't celebrate with him. They celebrated around him. They gave him a wide berth. When his terracore heart pulsed particularly brightly, they flinched. Only the lizard folk seemed comfortable in his presence. Kethrax approached him on the evening of the 3rd day, as Leo stood on the repaired southern wall, watching the sunset. "They fear what they don't understand," Kethrax said, his forked tongue flicking out. "My people have lived with this for generations." "They have reason to fear," Leo replied, his crystalline heart casting a soft amber glow on the stone parapet. "I'm becoming less human every day." "Human is a narrow category," Kethrax said. "You are becoming something more. Something tied to the land. My people have legends of such beings, earthwalkers, stone speakers. They were guardians, not monsters." Leo was about to respond when horns sounded from the eastern road. Not war horns. Ceremonial ones. Clear and bright and utterly out of place in the frontier wilderness. A procession appeared on the horizon. Dozens of riders in polished armor, banners flying, not the crude heraldry of regional lords, but the royal standard, a golden lion rampant on a field of crimson. At their head rode a herald in silvery robes, a scroll case held aloft. The celebrations in Dusthaven City died instantly. Villagers froze. Lizard folk hissed and melted into the shadows. Leo felt his terracore heart pulse faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. The land itself seemed to tense beneath his earth-anchor legs. The herald rode right up to the gates, which had been left open for the festivities. He didn't dismount. His eyes swept over the repaired walls, the bustling city, the mutated lord standing on the parapet with a glowing heart visible through his chest. For a moment, even the royal herald's composure cracked. His horse shied, sensing the geomancy radiating from Leo. Then the herald unrolled his scroll. The parchment crackled in the evening air. When he spoke, his voice carried magic, a projection spell that echoed through every street of Dusthaven City. By order of His Royal Majesty, King Alaric III, Sovereign of the Seven Realms, Protector of the Faith, and Keeper of the Ancient Accords. The herald's words fell like stones into a still pond. Lord Leo of Dusthaven is summoned to present himself at the royal capital within 30 days. His transformations have come to the attention of the Crown and the High Temple. He shall give account of his mutations, his settlement's unnatural growth, and his dealings with non-human races. Failure to appear will be considered treason against the Crown and heresy against the faith. The herald rolled the scroll back up with a sharp snap. He looked directly at Leo, his expression unreadable. The king himself has taken notice, Lord Leo. For judgment, or reward. The summons does not specify which. Then he turned his horse and rode away, the royal procession following. They left behind a city utterly silent, a people holding their breath, and a lord whose crystalline heart now pulsed with the slow, dreadful rhythm of approaching destiny. The journey to the capital took 17 days of hard travel through winding mountain passes and guarded checkpoints. Leo rode in a covered wagon, his monstrous form hidden beneath layers of cloth and illusion magic woven by Kethrax's most skilled shaman. The lizard folk leader had insisted on the precaution, his scaled hands trembling as he chanted over Leo's form. Even among my people, your mutations would draw fear, Kethrax had said, his forked tongue tasting the air. The capital's court will see only a monster unless we hide the truth. Now, as the wagon rattled through the massive iron gates of Ethelgard, Leo felt the illusion shimmer around him like a second skin. To any observer, he appeared as a tall, stern-faced lord with unremarkable features, a far cry from the truth of his petrified arm, glowing heart and avian talons concealed beneath boots. Only his eyes remained unchanged, their crystalline resource sight lenses drinking in the city's grandeur, mana flows tracing through sewer systems, mineral deposits beneath stone foundations, the intricate clockwork of a civilization built over centuries. Remember, Eldrin had whispered before departure, his old face lined with worry. They'll test you. The king's court is a nest of vipers wearing silk. Leo's truth-taste tongue flicked against the roof of his mouth, the prehensile organ tasting the air's chemical composition. Already he detected lies in the marketplace cries, the false smiles of courtiers, the hidden poisons in a noble's perfume. The capital was a beautiful trap. He was escorted to the royal palace, a sprawling complex of white marble and gold filigree that made Dusthaven's geomantic walls look like child's play. Guards in polished armor eyed him with suspicion, their hands resting on sword hilts. Leo's earth-anchor legs tingled, drawing faint mana from the palace's ancient foundations. He could feel the weight of history here, and the sharper, more dangerous weight of ambition. The throne room took his breath away. Vaulted ceilings rose 100 feet, stained glass windows casting rainbow patterns across a floor of polished obsidian. At the far end, upon a dais carved from a single block of star metal, sat King Alaric III. The sovereign of the Seven Realms was neither old nor young, a man in his prime with silver-streaked black hair and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore no crown, but authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. To Leo's resource sight, the king glowed with controlled power, his body threaded with enchanted sigils that pulsed with protective magic. Lord Leo of Dusthaven, announced the royal herald who delivered the summons. Presenting himself as commanded. Silence fell. Dozens of courtiers turned to stare, nobles in velvet and silk, mages in robes embroidered with constellations, military commanders with medals clinking on their chests. Leo's truth-taste tongue detected their emotions like flavors, curiosity sour as unripe fruit, fear bitter as wormwood, ambition sharp as peppercorn. Approach, said the king. His voice carried without shouting, resonant and calm. Leo walked forward, his sky-wren talons aching within their concealing boots. Each step echoed in the vast chamber. He stopped at the prescribed distance, 20 paces from the throne, and bowed as protocol demanded. Rise, said Alaric. Let us see the man who turned a starving hamlet into a geomantic city-state in less than a year. Who repelled a coalition of 3 lords. Who, according to reports, has unusual abilities. Leo straightened. I used engineering knowledge from my homeland, your majesty. And the land itself rewarded our efforts. The land, repeated a thin-faced noble to the king's right. Lord Valerius, Leo's truth-taste tongue identified from the herald's earlier briefing. Master of coin. His words carried the metallic tang of deception. Or something more unnatural. Rumors speak of transformations. Monstrous growths. Rumors are wind, said Leo carefully. Dusthaven stands because its people work together. Humans, lizard folk, all who sought shelter. An inclusive philosophy, said King Alaric, his winter eyes studying Leo. One that has served you well. But philosophy does not build walls that withstand earth elementals. Nor does it explain how you knew of a spy in your midst before he could complete his sabotage. Leo's heart, the terracore heart, pulsed visibly through his illusion, a soft amber glow that made the courtiers murmur. He willed it to calm. Observation, your majesty. And loyalty earned through shared struggle. Loyalty, said the king. A currency more valuable than gold. Let us test its worth. For 3 days, the testing continued. Leo was given a suite of rooms overlooking the palace gardens, elegant but clearly a gilded cage. Each morning, a new challenge arrived. First, a dispute over trade routes between merchant guilds. Leo used his resource sight eyes to analyze their ledgers, spotting forged entries where ink contained different mineral compositions. His truth-taste tongue identified which guild master lied about piracy losses. He proposed a rotating convoy system with shared guards, satisfying both parties. Second, an infestation of crystal-eating beetles in the palace archives. Leo's knowledge of modern pest control, combined with his stone grip arm's ability to crush the creature's chitin without damaging precious scrolls, solved it in an afternoon. But the third test was the true crucible. On the fourth morning, King Alaric summoned Leo to a smaller council chamber. Present were the king, Lord Valerius, and a delegation of dwarves, 5 broad-shouldered figures with braided beards and eyes like chips of flint. These are representatives from the Iron Peak clan, said the king. Their mines produce 70% of the realm's adamantine. Recently, their operations have stalled. Tunnels collapse. Strange tremors shake the deep places. They seek aid, but trust no surface dweller. One dwarf stepped forward, her armor etched with runes of endurance. I am Thrain, daughter of Thror, she said, her voice gravel-grinding stone. We've lost 30 miners this month. The earth itself turns against us. Your king says you have an affinity for stone. Leo's earth anchor legs trembled with sympathetic vibration. He could feel it, a disturbance deep below, like a sickness in the world's bones. May I examine your maps and samples? Thrain nodded curtly, unrolling a vellum map on the table. It showed the Iron Peak mines in astonishing detail, shafts plunging miles deep, chambers where adamantine veins glimmered like frozen lightning. Leo's resource sight eyes focused, analyzing the geological layers. His truth-taste tongue sampled the air around the map, catching traces of minerals, dwarven sweat, and something else, a faint, wrong sweetness like rotting fruit. Here, said Leo, pointing to a secondary shaft marked with dwarven runes for abandoned. This area. What happened here? Thrain's stony expression cracked with surprise. A century ago. A cave-in sealed it. Why? Because the tremors aren't natural, said Leo. He tapped the map. Your main shafts run parallel to an underground river system. But here, his finger traced a line, the river has been diverted. Something is deliberately flooding your lower mines, weakening foundations. Impossible, growled another dwarf. No one but dwarves know these tunnels. Someone does, said Leo. His truth-taste tongue flicked out involuntarily, a quick, serpentine motion that made the dwarves recoil. The illusion shimmered, revealing for a heartbeat the truth of his face before stabilizing. He tasted the deception now, clear as poison. You've had visitors recently. Surface nobles offering to buy adamantine at triple price. One of them brought gifts, casks of wine, perhaps. Thrain's eyes widened. Lord Corvin's envoy. 2 months passed. Leo's terracore heart pulsed with understanding. Corvin, even defeated, had laid traps. The wine wasn't poisoned. But the casks contained slow-release alchemical agents. When emptied into your waste channels, they seeped into the groundwater, creating acidic compounds that eat through rock. Your tunnels aren't collapsing, they're being dissolved. Silence. Then Thrain slammed a fist on the table. Betrayal. A solution, then, said King Alaric, watching Leo with renewed interest. Can it be fixed? Leo nodded. With your permission, I can design a drainage system to redirect the tainted water. My people in Dusthaven can fabricate the components. In exchange, he met Thrain's gaze. Dusthaven receives a 10% share of adamantine output for 5 years, and mining rights to the silver veins in your eastern foothills. 15%, countered Thrain. 12, with technical assistance to prevent future sabotage. The dwarves huddled, speaking in their guttural tongue. Finally, Thrain extended a calloused hand. Agreed. Your insight has saved lives. The Iron Peak clan honors its debts. As their hands clasped, Leo felt it, a surge of energy through the kingdom's symbiosis system. Dusthaven's growth, the new trade deal, the secured resources. The settlement leveled up. Geomantic city-state advances to level 11, trade hub of the north. Pain exploded through Leo's scalp. He staggered, the illusion magic flickering wildly. Courtiers gasped as his hair transformed, not falling out, but thickening, coiling, becoming living vines that sprouted from his skull. They writhed like emerald serpents, tipped with sensitive tendrils that tasted the air. Mutation acquired, grasp vine hair. The vines could extend up to 10 feet, strong enough to lift a man or sense vibrations through stone. But they made him look feral, a forest creature masquerading in human clothes. The illusion shattered completely, revealing his full monstrous form, petrified arm, glowing heart, avian talons, crystalline eyes, and now a crown of animate vegetation. Chaos erupted. Guards drew swords. Lord Valerius shouted, sorcery. Hold. King Alaric's voice cut through the panic. He rose from his chair, winter eyes fixed on Leo. You hid this from us. Would you have listened if I hadn't? Leo's voice was raw, the vines twitching around his face. Every advancement of my land changes my body. This is the price Dusthaven pays for survival. A steep price, murmured the king. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled, a thin, calculating expression. But one that appears to yield results. The Dwarf Alliance alone is worth a dozen normal treaties. He stepped down from the dais, ignoring his guards' protests. Tell me, Lord Leo. What do your new appendages sense now? Leo closed his eyes. The grasp vine hair extended, tendrils brushing floor, walls, ceiling. They tasted vibrations, the heartbeat of guards, the rustle of clothing, the nearly imperceptible scrape of metal on stone from the ventilation shaft above. There, whispered Leo. His vines snapped upward, punching through decorative grillwork. A scream echoed as they wrapped around a figure hidden in the duct, a man in black leathers, a crossbow loaded with a bolt that glowed with necrotic energy aimed directly at the king's throne. The would-be assassin struggled, but the vines constricted, pulling him down to crash onto the council table. Leo's truth-taste tongue hissed, tasting the poison on the bolt, soul rot, instant death even for a king protected by enchantments. Lord Valerius paled. That's one of my household guards. Not anymore, said Leo, his vines pinning the assassin. He's been bribed. Taste the air, fear, yes, but underneath, the cloying sweetness of demonic pact. This wasn't political assassination. This was something darker. King Alaric stared at the captured man, then at Leo. The throne room had gone utterly silent. You saved my life, he said finally. Unmasked a traitor. Secured a dwarven alliance. All while wearing a form that would see most men burned at the stake. He walked closer, until he stood an arm's length from Leo. What are you? A builder, said Leo, the vines retracting slightly. A guardian. A monster, if you wish. But my kingdom thrives, and I serve the realm's interests. For a long moment, the king studied him. Then he nodded, decision made. A dukedom, he declared, his voice carrying through the chamber. The northern marches have been overrun by demonic incursions. Villages gone silent. The land itself bleeds corruption. I name you Duke of the Northern Marches, with full authority to raise armies and fortify the border. Murmurs of shock. Lord Valerius sputtered, Your Majesty, he's not even fully human. Precisely, said Alaric, his eyes never leaving Leo. Who better to fight monsters than one who understands them? Lead a campaign north. Cleanse the infestation. Do this, and Dusthaven will be recognized as an independent duchy, answerable only to the crown. Your mutations will be celebrated as gifts rather than feared as curses. Leo's terracore heart pulsed rapidly. He saw the trap within the reward, a suicide mission against unknown horrors, far from his people, using his monstrous body as a weapon. But also saw the opportunity, legitimacy, expansion, protection for Dusthaven. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. The king's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you remain a curiosity. A lord with unusual abilities, yes, but one whose land could be reassigned to more traditional nobility. The choice is yours." The vines in Leo's hair stirred, tasting the king's sincerity. He was telling the truth, both the promise and the threat. The court held its breath, waiting. Leo looked at his hands, one petrified wood, the other tipped with retractable viper fangs. He thought of Dusthaven's walls, of Eldrin's worried face, of Kethrax's people finding refuge. Of a kingdom he'd built from dust. "I'll go north," he said. And in his chest, the Terracore heart glowed like a captured star, already sensing the corruption waiting in the dark places of the world. The northern marches were a land that had forgotten warmth. Leo stood at the head of his army, his breath crystallizing in the air before being snatched away by the biting wind. Behind him stretched a column of 300 souls, Dusthaven veterans in patched gambesons, lizardfolk warriors with scales dulled by frost, and dwarven miners whose beards were now isekai'd. The dwarves had come not for glory but for the promise of adamantine veins rumored to lie beneath the demon-corrupted peaks. Leo's own form was a tapestry of contradictions, his Terracore heart glowed faintly through layers of furs, a pulsing amber light that seemed to beat in time with the frozen earth, while his grasp-vine hair coiled restlessly beneath a heavy hood, sensing vibrations in the ice. They had marched for 7 days through a landscape that grew more hostile with each mile. What began as snow-dusted pine forests had given way to jagged obsidian spires that pierced the sky like broken teeth. The air carried a metallic tang, and the ground was marbled with veins of violet corruption that pulsed with a sickly light. Leo's resource-sight eyes, hidden behind tinted goggles, revealed the truth: the corruption was alive, a network of demonic energy leeching vitality from the land. Eldrin, the old peasant who had become one of his steadiest sergeants, trudged beside him, his face gaunt with cold. "Never seen earth so, wrong, my lord," he muttered, his words barely audible over the wind. On the 8th day, the demons found them. It began with whispers on the wind, skittering sounds that echoed from the ice caves dotting the cliffs. Leo's grasp-vine hair stiffened, sensing movement ahead. He raised a petrified hand, halting the column. For a moment, there was only the howl of the gale. Then, from crevices in the rock, creatures emerged. They were hunched, bipedal things with skin like cracked porcelain and eyes that burned with cold blue fire. Frost imps, Kale called them, his voice trembling. The lizardfolk warrior Kethrax hissed, his own natural mutations, ridged spines and clawed hands, twitching in readiness. "They are scouts," Kethrax said. "The greater demons send them to weaken prey." The imps attacked in a shrieking wave, moving with unnatural speed across the ice. Leo's army met them with disciplined formations, dwarven shields locking together, lizardfolk striking with poison spears, humans loosing arrows fletched with raven feathers. But the imps were insidious. Where they fell, their bodies dissolved into pools of freezing slime that spread the violet corruption, sapping the warmth from anyone who stepped too close. Leo felt the kingdom's symbiosis system thrum within him, a subtle vibration that grew with each defensive success. His settlement was leveling up, adapting to this new hellscape. He fought with the grotesque toolkit his mutations provided. His viper-strike arm lashed out, injecting paralytic venom into an imp that leaped for Eldrin's throat. His gale-breath lungs expelled a concentrated blast of air, clearing a path through a cluster of imps and momentarily dispersing the corrupting mist they emitted. But the terrain was against them. The ice was treacherous, and his earth anchor legs, which usually drew strength from stable ground, found little purchase here. As the battle raged, a notification flashed in his mind, silent yet undeniable. Dusthaven has advanced to level 12, Frost-Forged Bastion. The mutation struck without warning. A searing cold raced through his bones, not from the outside but from within. He stumbled, dropping to one knee as his skeleton reconfigured itself. His bones grew lighter, hollowing out like avian structures, threaded with intricate channels that hummed with kinetic energy. Wind-hollow bones, they would enhance his agility, allow him to move with preternatural speed, but at a cost. He could feel their fragility, a brittle delicacy that made every impact a potential shatter. As the transformation completed, he rose, his movements now fluid, almost weightless. The imp seemed to slow in his perception. He darted between them, his sky-wren talons, still tender from the siege, scoring the ice as he pivoted, his new bones absorbing the shock with eerie silence. The skirmish ended with the imps retreating into the caves, leaving a dozen of Leo's people wounded with frostbite and corruption burns. They made camp in the lee of a basalt cliff, huddling around magically heated stones provided by the dwarves. Thrain, the daughter of Thror, approached Leo as he inspected his arms. The wind-hollow bones had left his limbs slightly elongated, his frame more gaunt. "Your people whisper that you are becoming a demon yourself," she said bluntly, her dwarf eyes sharp. "They see these changes and fear the marches are claiming you." Leo met her gaze, his truth-taste tongue detecting no malice, only concern. "The system gives no choice," he replied, his voice raspy from the gale breath use. "Every victory for Dusthaven is a loss for my humanity. But I will see this through." 2 days later, they reached the heart of the corruption, a glacial valley where the violet veins converged into a pulsating nexus. Here, the frost demons waited. They were towering beings of ice and shadow, with limbs that ended in crystalline claws and maws that breathed blizzards. One detached from the group, moving with a grace that belied its size. It was a creature of refined malice, its form sculpted into something almost beautiful, a parody of an elven knight wrought in hoarfrost and despair. It spoke, its voice the crackle of breaking ice. "Little lordling, you bring toys to a realm of teeth. Your bones will make fine chimes for our halls." The demon attacked. Leo engaged it, his wind-hollow bones allowing him to evade its initial strikes with dizzying flips and slides. He used his grasp vine hair to snag a falling icicle, hurling it into the demon's shoulder. The creature roared, and its breath enveloped Leo in a vortex of absolute cold. His carapace shield frosted over, and his bones screamed in protest. He felt a crack, a hairline fracture in his left femur, and agony lanced through him. The demon pressed its advantage, a claw sweeping toward his chest. In that moment, Leo did not fight as a man, but as a symphony of mutations. He anchored his earth anchor legs deep into the permafrost, drawing not warmth but stability. His terracore heart flared, and he channeled geomancy through the ice, not to shatter it but to harmonize with its frequency. The ground trembled, and the demon's footing faltered. Leo unleashed his gale breath, not at the demon, but at the corruption veins around them, scattering the violet energy like dust. With the demon disoriented, he struck with his viper strike arm, injecting venom into a joint. The creature staggered, its icy form beginning to melt from within. His army, inspired, surged forward. Dwarven hammers rang against frozen hides, lizardfolk spears found gaps in the crystalline armor, and human archers aimed for the burning eyes. The frost demons fell, one by one, until only the nexus remained, a throbbing mass of corruption at the valley's center. Leo approached it, his bones aching with every step. He placed his hands on the nexus, his stone grip arm and terracore heart working in tandem. He did not destroy it, he purified it, drawing the demonic energy into himself and transmuting it through his mutated physiology. The violet light faded, replaced by a clean, white radiance that spread across the valley, melting the corruption and revealing patches of dormant soil beneath. As the light cleared, a figure emerged from behind the now dormant nexus. It was not a demon. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His body was a mosaic of mutations, wings of shadow frayed at the edges, eyes that swirled with captured starlight, and skin that shifted between flesh and scales. He wore tattered robes that might have been noble once, and in his hand, he held a staff carved from a single piece of weeping obsidian. He looked at Leo with an expression of profound sadness. "So, the king has sent another," the man said, his voice echoing with layers, as if multiple souls spoke through him. "Another fool to be twisted by the system, another pawn to die in his games." Leo's grasp vine hair quivered, sensing no immediate threat, only immense power. "Who are you?" "I was Lord Valerius," the man replied. "Once a duke of these marches, until my city grew too prosperous, and the system rewarded me with this." He gestured to his own mutated form. "The demons you fought are my children, born of my corruption and despair. Alaric knew what this land would do to me. He sent me here to die, just as he has sent you." Leo's mind raced. Lord Valerius, the name from the assassin in the capital. This was the man whose household guard had been bribed. "You're the demon lord." "A title given by those who fear what they cannot understand," Valerius said, stepping closer. His shadow wings unfurled slightly, casting patterns on the ice. "Leo, we are the same. The system uses us, breaks us, and the king discards us when we become too monstrous. But together, we need not be pawns." He extended a hand that shimmered between claw and human fingers. "Join me. With our combined mutations, we can overthrow Alaric, tear down the kingdom's symbiosis system, and build a new order where growth does not demand transformation into freaks. Your Dust Haven could be the capital of a world free from this curse. The offer hung in the frozen air, a pact that promised power and rebellion. Leo looked at his own mutated hands, then back at Valerius, seeing not a monster, but a mirror. The glacial cavern echoed with the drip of melting ice and the low, guttural hum of demonic energy. Leo stood before the being who called himself Lord Valerius, his mutations thrumming in response to the corruption saturating the air. Valerius was a nightmare-given form, wings of shadow and bone stretched from his back, their leathery membranes veined with molten gold that pulsed like a second heartbeat. His skin resembled cooled lava, cracked and glowing with inner fire, while eyes of pure obsession fixed on Leo. "You see it now, don't you?" Valerius's voice was a symphony of whispers, each word layered with echoes. "The truth the king hides beneath his gilded throne." Leo's terracore heart beat a steady rhythm against his ribs, its crystalline structure glowing faintly through the layers of cloth and chitinous plating he wore. His grass vine hair stirred, the living vines twitching as they sensed the vibrations in the cavern walls. The wind-hollow bones in his limbs made him feel light, almost ethereal, but he remembered their brittleness, the near shattering from the frost demon's blow still fresh in his memory. "King Alaric III," Valerius continued, taking a step forward. Molten droplets fell from his wings, hissing as they struck the ice. "He preaches purity while his ancestors built their empire on the backs of mutants like us. The kingdom's symbiosis system wasn't designed to empower, it was created to control. Every mutation you've gained, every transformation that alienates you from your people, is part of his design." Leo's truth-taste tongue flicked against the roof of his mouth. The air carried the flavor of deception, sharp and coppery, like blood mixed with ozone. But beneath it, he tasted something else, genuine bitterness, the acrid sting of betrayal. Valerius believed what he was saying, at least in part. "When my settlement reached level 5, Valerius said, his molten skin cracking wider as he gestured. "I gained wings. Not these shadows, true, feathered wings that could catch the sun. The king's agents came in the night. They offered me a choice, serve as his hidden weapon, or be purged as an abomination." Leo's stone grip arm clenched, the petrified wood groaning. "And you chose to become this?" "No," Valerius's laugh was bitter. "I chose freedom. When I refused, they tried to burn my village. I fought back, and with each defense, my settlement leveled. With each level, I mutated further. The wings darkened. The skin hardened. The system they created to control us became my path to power." Ice crystals formed on Leo's carapace shield as he processed the words. His resource sight eyes scanned the cavern, noting the strategic positions of Valerius's frost demons, a dozen of them lurking in the shadows, their forms shifting between ice and shadow. They were positioned to flank him, to cut off retreat. This wasn't just a conversation, it was an ambush in the making. "Join me," Valerius extended a hand, the gesture almost human beneath the molten exterior. "Together, we can overthrow Alaric. Dismantle the system. Create a world where mutations aren't feared but celebrated. Your Dust Haven could be the capital of a new empire, one built by mutants, for mutants." The offer hung in the frozen air. Leo thought of Dust Haven, of Eldrin's weathered hands planting the first crops, of Mara singing to her child as she worked the looms, of Kale's eager questions about engineering principles. He thought of the lizard folk who'd found refuge in his walls, of Thrane's dwarven delegates negotiating in good faith. They weren't building an empire of monsters, they were building a home. His truth-taste tongue flicked again. This time, the deception wasn't in Valerius's words about the king, those carried the bitter truth of personal experience. The lie was in the offer itself. Beneath the promise of alliance, Leo tasted the cloying sweetness of betrayal, the saccharine flavor of a trap being sprung. "You don't want to dismantle the system," Leo said, his voice steady despite the cold. "You want to control it. To become the new king." Valerius's obsidian eyes narrowed. The molten cracks in his skin glowed brighter. "You misunderstand." "No," Leo's viper-strike arm tensed, the serpentine scales along his forearm rippling. "I taste your deceit. You'll use me to take the throne, then purge me as Alaric would have purged you. The cycle continues, just with different monsters in charge." For a moment, the cavern was silent save for the drip of water. Then Valerius's wings snapped open, casting shadows that danced with inner fire. "A pity. I hoped you'd be wiser." The frost demons emerged from the shadows, their forms solidifying into jagged ice and darkness. Leo's mind raced, 12 opponents, a confined space, his wind-hollow bones vulnerable to shattering. But as the first demon lunged, something shifted within him. The kingdom's symbiosis system thrummed in his blood. Dusthaven wasn't just leveling from population growth or resource accumulation anymore, it was advancing from strategic insight, from Leo's understanding of the political landscape, from his rejection of a corrupt alliance. The settlement reached level 13, strategic nexus. And the mutation hit. It began in his throat, a burning sensation that spread through his vocal cords, reshaping them into something new. Leo gasped, clutching at his neck as the transformation rippled outward. When he tried to speak, the sound that emerged wasn't words but a wave of force that shattered the ice stalactites above. Echo command voice. The mutation seared through him, leaving his throat raw and strained. He could feel the power thrumming in every syllable, a sonic weapon that could shatter stone or compel obedience, but each use threatened to tear his vocal cords to shreds. Valerius hesitated, his molten skin cooling slightly in surprise. Another gift from the system you claim to hate. Leo didn't waste words. He drew a deep breath through his gale-breath lungs, feeling the air compress and purify within him. Then he spoke a single command, halt. The word emerged as a visible ripple in the air, a concussive wave that struck the advancing frost demons. 3 of them shattered instantly, their icy forms exploding into glittering dust. The others stumbled, their movement slowed as if fighting against an invisible barrier. But the strain was immediate. Fire lanced through Leo's throat, and he tasted blood at the back of his mouth. The echo command voice was powerful, but it came with a cost, each use was self-inflicted damage. Valerius recovered faster than Leo expected. With a roar that shook the cavern, the demon lord surged forward, molten wings beating to propel him across the ice. Leo raised his carapace shield, bracing for impact. The collision sent shockwaves through the cavern. Valerius's fist, glowing with heat, struck the shield with enough force to crack the chitinous surface. Leo's earth anchor legs dug into the ice, drawing mana from the ground to steady himself, but he felt his wind-hollow bones vibrate dangerously with the impact. You think one new mutation changes anything? Valerius hissed, his face inches from Leo's. Up close, Leo could see the human features buried beneath the molten transformation, the ghost of the man Valerius had been before the system changed him. I have decades of mutations. Centuries of power. Leo's grasp vine hair lashed out, the living vines wrapping around Valerius's arm. They sizzled where they touched the molten skin, but they held long enough for Leo to bring his stone grip arm around in a crushing blow. The impact echoed like a landslide. Valerius staggered back, molten droplets spraying across the ice. But he didn't fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound of genuine amusement mixed with pain. Good, he said, wiping blood-tinged magma from his lip. I was worried this would be too easy. The remaining frost demons regrouped, moving with coordinated precision. Leo realized with dawning horror that they weren't mindless beasts, they were soldiers, trained and disciplined. Valerius hadn't just embraced his mutations, he'd built an army with them. Think, Leo commanded himself. His throat burned with the need to use the echo command voice again, but he knew he had maybe 2, 3 uses left before his vocal cords gave out completely. He needed strategy, not just power. His resource sight eyes scanned the cavern again, this time looking beyond the combatants. He saw the weak points in the ice ceiling, the channels where geothermal heat rose from deep below, the patterns in the demonic corruption that saturated the area. And he saw something else, a glimmer of pure, uncorrupted mana pulsing from Valerius's chest. The demon lord's version of a terracore heart. You're still connected, Leo realized aloud, his voice hoarse from the strain. To your settlement. To the land. Valerius's expression shifted from amusement to something darker. What of it? You claim to hate the system, Leo said, circling slowly, his earth anchor legs leaving deep prints in the ice. But you're using it just like Alaric did. You've tied your people's growth to your mutations. How many of them have suffered because you needed another level? Another transformation? For the first time, doubt flickered in Valerius's obsidian eyes. They chose this path. They. Liar. Leo put everything into the word, unleashing the full power of his echo command voice. The sonic wave struck Valerius directly, not as an attack but as a compulsion, a command to speak truth. The effect was immediate and devastating. Valerius convulsed, his molten skin cracking wider as he fought against the compulsion. When he spoke, the words were torn from him against his will. I burned their homes, to trigger attacks, to level faster, they never had a choice. The confession hung in the air. The frost demons hesitated, their discipline breaking as they processed their lord's admission. Leo didn't wait. He drew another breath, ignoring the agony in his throat, and spoke a third command: retreat. The word washed over Valerius's forces not as a request but as an absolute order. The frost demons turned as one, their forms dissolving into shadow as they fled deeper into the caverns. Valerius alone remained, shaking with rage and the aftershocks of compelled truth. You. He snarled, magma tears tracing paths down his face. You don't understand what you've done. I understand perfectly, Leo said, his voice barely a whisper now. Every word was agony. You became the monster Alaric feared you would be. I won't make the same mistake. He raised his viper-strike arm, the serpentine scales glowing with stored venom. But he didn't strike. Instead, he met Valerius's eyes. Leave the northern marches. Take your corruption with you. If I see you again, I won't show mercy. For a long moment, Valerius stood frozen, wings half spread, molten skin cooling to black rock. Then, with a sound that was equal parts scream and sob, he turned and vanished into the shadows, following his retreating forces. Leo collapsed to one knee, blood dripping from his mouth onto the ice. The echo command voice had left his throat in ruins, he could feel the torn tissue with every breath. But Dusthaven had leveled. The demonic incursion was broken. The campaign was won. It took 3 days for Leo's forces to secure the glacial valley, purging the remaining corruption with a combination of gale breath and terracore heart geomancy. The wind-hollow bones made the journey back agonizing, every jostle threatened to crack them, but they held. By the time Dusthaven's banners flew over the purified northern marches, Leo could speak again in a rasping whisper, though the doctors warned his voice might never fully recover. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it tasted of blood and impending storm. When Leo returned to the capital Ethelgard, expecting to claim his dukedom and secure Dusthaven's legitimacy, he found the city gates barred. The royal banners had been torn down, replaced by a stark white standard bearing a sword piercing a mutated heart. Purest sigil. From the walls, a figure in polished armor looked down, his face hidden behind a helm crafted to resemble a flawless human visage. Leo of Dusthaven, the man called, his voice carrying on the cold wind. By order of the Noble Purification Council, you are declared an enemy of humanity. Your mutations have contaminated the kingdom. Surrender for cleansing, or be eradicated. Behind the speaker, Leo could see chaos in the streets, smoke rising from multiple districts, the clash of steel, and the screams of those deemed impure. King Alaric III had been overthrown, not by demons or rival lords, but by his own people. And they had come for the monsters first. The air in Ethelgard tasted of ash and iron. Leo stood in the shadow of the palace gates, his grass-vine hair twitching with the vibrations of distant screams. The Noble Purification Council's banners, a silver sword piercing a twisted, blackened heart, hung where King Alaric's lion standard had flown just days before. Around him, the capital's streets churned with chaos. Armored soldiers in polished plate marched in tight formations, their faces hidden behind visors shaped like weeping angels. They dragged figures from doorways, a woman with scales along her neck, a man whose fingers ended in delicate claws, a child with eyes that glowed like banked coals. The mutants didn't fight. They wept, pleaded, or stood silent as blades rose and fell. Lord Leo. A voice hissed from an alley. Kethrax, the lizard folk leader, pressed against the wall, his natural green scales dulled with soot. The illusion magic that had once concealed Leo's mutations was gone, shattered during the coup. Now, Leo's monstrous form stood bare, the petrified wood of his stone grip arm, the chitinous plates of his carapace shield fused to his left side, the living vines of his hair writhing like serpents. His wind-hollow bones made his movements eerily fluid, but each step carried the brittle risk of fracture. They've declared the Northern Marches campaign a heresy. Your dukedom is revoked. Warrants are out for your arrest, and for any abomination linked to you. Leo's truth-taste tongue flicked against his lips. The metallic tang of fear, the sourness of lies, the cloying sweetness of fanaticism, it all washed over him. Dusthaven, he said, his voice a low rumble that made the alley stones tremble. Have they reached Dusthaven? Scouts report 3 purist armies marching north, Kethrax said. 1 from the capital, 2 from neighboring baronies. They move fast. Burning villages that shelter mutants. They call it cleansing. A cold settled in Leo's terracore heart, the organ that pulsed with the rhythm of his land. He could feel Dusthaven's distress through the bond, a faint, panic tremor across hundreds of miles. His people. Eldrin, Mara, Kale, Joran, Finn, those who had stayed loyal despite his transformations. And the outcasts, the lizard folk, the few beastmen who'd sought refuge, others with minor mutations who trickled in over the months. All now targets. He had no army here. His forces were scattered, some garrisoning the northern marches, others escorting supply trains. The capital was a trap. But Dusthaven. Dusthaven had walls he'd designed, traps he'd engineered, people he'd taught to fight. And it had him. "We ride north," Leo said. Now. They moved like ghosts through the falling city. Leo used his glow-skin camouflage to blend with the smoke-choked shadows, his resource sight eyes piercing the gloom to spot patrols. His grass-vine hair snaked ahead, sensing vibrations, once whipping out to coil around a purist scout's throat and silence him before an alarm could be raised. They stole horses from a looted stable, sturdy northern breeds, and fled Ethelgard as the sun bled red over the spires. The journey was a blur of hard riding and horror. Every few miles, they passed pyres. Bodies twisted by mutations, extra limbs, crystalline skin, bestial features, blackened and crackling. Survivors huddled in ditches, their eyes hollow. Leo's truth-taste tongue caught their whispers, "The changed are cursed. The purists say they're demons. They're killing children." By the time the rolling hills gave way to Dusthaven's timbered outskirts, Leo's terrorcore heart was hammering. He saw the smoke first, thick, grey columns rising from the eastern farmsteads. Then the sounds, the distant thunder of siege engines, the clash of steel, the screams. Dusthaven's walls, once proud logs reinforced with stone and iron brackets, were scarred. One section near the south gate smoldered, breached by catapult fire. Purist soldiers in silver and white livery swarmed like ants, their banners snapping in the wind. Arrows rained down from the parapets, Dusthaven's defenders, a mix of humans and lizard folk, fighting desperately. But it wasn't the only front. To the west, near the refugee camps that had sprung up outside the walls, a second purist force advanced. These were lighter troops, militia and fanatics wielding torches and crude spears. They herded a crowd of mutants toward a hastily built palisade. Leo's enhanced vision picked out details: a mother clutching a child with feathered arms, an old man whose legs were fused into a single trunk-like limb, a young woman with gills fluttering at her neck. They were being driven into a killing zone. 2 fronts. His city besieged, his people trapped. Leo dismounted, his earth anchor legs slamming into the soil. Mana surged up from the ground, steadying him, but the roots that formed locked him in place. He couldn't afford to be static. Not now. Kethrax, Leo growled. Take what riders we have. Reinforce the main gate. Hold the breach. I'll handle the west. The lizard folk leader nodded, his forked tongue flicking. They outnumber us 10 to 1. Then we make each one count. Leo focused inward, on the kingdom's Symbiosis System. His settlement was under existential threat, its people dying, its structures burning. The system responded to need, to crisis. He poured his will into it, not seeking growth but survival. He visualized the walls thickening, the traps resetting, the morale hardening. He chanted under his breath, a litany of engineering principles and desperate hope: reinforce the foundations. Redirect the attacks. Protect the core. A notification flashed in his mind, silent but searing. Dusthaven has leveled up. From Strategic Nexus, level 13. To Bastion of the Besieged, level 14. Achieved through emergency fortification under genocide threat. All defensive structures enhanced. Morale temporarily locked at defiant. Mutation unlocked, Quicksilver blood. Pain erupted through Leo's veins. It started as a burn, then a freezing chill, then a corrosive ache that made his bones feel like they were dissolving. He gasped, his echo command voice tearing from his throat in a raw, wordless cry that shook leaves from nearby trees. His skin, already patchwork of mutations, shimmered. Beneath it, his blood transformed. He could feel it, a liquid silver, heavy and alive, coursing through him. It pooled in his palms as he clenched his fists, droplets oozing from his pores. They sizzled where they hit the grass, eating tiny pits into the soil. The quicksilver blood was a weapon and a curse. It could melt steel, heal allies' wounds with a touch, but if too much spilled, it would poison him from within, turning his organs to slag. He wrenched his earth anchor legs free, the roots snapping with a sound like breaking pottery. His wind-hollow bones made him light, almost floating, as he sprinted toward the western camp. His movements were a blur, a monstrous specter closing the distance. The purest militia saw him coming. A man in a stained surcoat pointed, his face pale. Abomination. The mutant lord. They turned, a ragged line of perhaps 200. Farmers, tradesmen, zealots armed with hatred. They leveled spears, drew bows. Leo didn't slow. He activated his carapace shield, the chitinous plates on his left side flaring out into a broad, curved barrier. Arrows thudded into it, sticking like pins in cork. Spears skittered off the surface. Then he was among them. His stone grip arm swung, not with finesse but with brutal, petrified force. It shattered a shield, crumpled breastplates, sent bodies flying. His viper strike arm lashed out, fingers tipped with venomous spines that punched through leather and flesh. Men convulsed, foaming at the mouth, as the neurotoxin hit. But there were too many. They swarmed him, hacking at his legs, his back. An axe bit into his shoulder, drawing a spray of quicksilver blood. The fluid hit the attacker's face. He screamed, dropping his weapon as the silver ate through skin, muscle, and bone, leaving a smoking hole where his cheek had been. Leo roared, his echo command voice blasting outward. Asterisk asterisk drop your weapons, asterisk asterisk. The sonic wave hit like a physical wall. Militiamen staggered, hands flying to their ears. Some complied, weapons clattering to the ground. Others, more fanatical, resisted, their eyes wild. Leo's vocal cords burned with the effort, a raw, tearing pain that warned of overuse. He fought his way to the palisade. The mutant refugees were pressed against the logs, trapped. A purist captain, a hard-faced woman with a silver gorget, was directing archers to fire into the crowd. No quarter for the corrupted, she shrieked. Leo's grasp-vine hair shot forward, not at the captain, but at the palisade supports. The living vines, thick as ropes, coiled around the timber braces and pulled. Wood groaned, nails screeched. With a final heave from his stone grip arm, the section tore free, crashing outward and crushing 3 archers beneath it. Run! Leo bellowed at the refugees. To the city. Now! They surged forward, a flood of desperate bodies. Leo became their rear guard. He stood in the gap, his mutations working in concert. His gale-breath lungs exhaled a gale that knocked pursuers off their feet. His resource-sight eyes tracked every movement, predicting attacks. His quicksilver blood oozed from wounds, forming a corrosive moat around him. When a purist knight on horseback charged, lance leveled, Leo let the point strike his carapace shield, then grabbed the shaft with his stone grip arm and yanked. The knight tumbled from the saddle. Leo slammed a fist into the horse's side, not to harm the beast, but to startle it into bolting through the purist ranks, causing chaos. But the cost mounted. Each use of his echo command voice sent cracks of agony through his throat. Each spill of quicksilver blood left him weaker, a toxic fatigue seeping into his muscles. He could feel the poison circulating, a silver fire in his veins. His vision blurred at the edges. He herded the last of the refugees through the broken palisade, toward Dust Haven's West Sally Port. Arrows from the walls kept the purists at bay. As the portcullis clanked shut behind him, Leo leaned against the stone, breathing in ragged, painful gulps. The quicksilver blood dripped from a dozen cuts, sizzling on the cobbles. Inside him, the poison gnawed. He'd saved maybe 300 mutants. But the main battle still raged at the south gate. He could hear Kethrax's forces struggling, the roar of flames, the crash of collapsing masonry. He pushed himself upright, his body protesting every movement. He had to rally. He had to. A sound cut through the din. Not of battle, but of chanting. Deep, resonant, weaving through the air like a physical thread. It came from a hilltop beyond the western camp, where the purist command tent stood. A figure stood there, robed in white embroidered with golden runes. An archmage, his staff raised high, its tip glowing with a light that hurt to look at. The archmage's voice boomed, amplified by magic, reaching every corner of the battlefield. Asterisk asterisk by the pure light of creation, I unravel the tapestry of corruption. Let no abomination stand, asterisk asterisk. The staff flared. A wave of energy erupted, not fire or lightning, but something subtler, more terrible. It was a shimmer in the air, a distortion that made reality seem to waver like heat haze. It swept outward, passing over the purest forces harmlessly, but where it touched mutants, they cried out. A lizardfolk soldier near Leo clutched his head, his scales flickering, becoming translucent. A woman with crystalline skin screamed as her body began to dissolve into motes of light. The wave hit Leo. It was like being dipped in acid and ice simultaneously. His mutations recoiled. His stone grip arm trembled, the petrified wood cracking. His grasp vine hair withered, the vines turning brittle and gray. His quicksilver blood boiled in his veins, threatening to erupt. Worst of all, he felt a pulling, a tearing at his very essence. The kingdom's symbiosis system, the bond that tied him to Dusthaven, shuddered. It was as if the spell sought to sever it, to undo every change, to return him to a baseline human, or erase him entirely. Leo staggered, falling to one knee. He looked down at his hands. The skin was peeling back, not in blood, but in strands of light and shadow. Beneath, he could see his bones, the wind-hollow bones glowing with an eerie phosphorescence, then starting to fracture into glittering dust. His body was unraveling, thread by thread, mutation by mutation. The world blurred into a nightmare of pain and dissolving form. The Archmage's spell was eating him alive from the inside out, and he had no strength left to fight it. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of agony. Leo's body wasn't just being torn apart, it was being unmade. The purest Archmage's reality-warping spell, a torrent of shimmering, antiseptic light from the hilltop, didn't cut or burn. It unraveled. His stone grip arm, the first petrified limb that had marked his monstrous journey, began to flicker like a faulty hologram, its solid wood grain softening, becoming translucent, threatening to dissolve into motes of forgotten memory. His earth anchor legs, rooted deep into the cobblestones of Dusthaven's central square, trembled as their connection to the land frayed. The comforting draw of mana from the ground sputtered, replaced by a hollow, sucking void. He was a tapestry being pulled apart thread by thread. His glow-skin camouflage flared erratically, casting jagged shadows. His resource-sight eyes saw not veins of or hidden springs, but the ghostly outlines of his own bones, the wind-hollow bones that now felt as insubstantial as ash. Every mutation, every grotesque gift from the kingdom's symbiosis system, screamed in dissonant harmony as the spell sought to purge them from existence, to rewrite him into a baseline, acceptable human. The very air around him crackled with negation. Behind him, the gates of Dusthaven, now the bastion of the besieged, groaned under renewed purest assault, the sounds of battle a distant thunder to the personal apocalypse consuming him. This is the price, a detached part of his engineer's mind observed, even as his viper-strike arm convulsed uselessly. The system's final invoice. Growth for transformation. Security for self. He could feel the symbiotic link to his land, the foundation of it all, stretching taut, a cord about to snap. If it broke, the spell would complete its work. He would be nothing. A blank slate, or worse, a dissipating cloud of annihilated potential. Dusthaven, sensing its lord's distress through that link, shuddered. The recently fortified walls seemed to lean inward, the new watchtowers groaning in sympathy. Retreat was impossible. Resistance with individual mutations was futile, the spell was designed to counter each one, to cancel them out. His echo command voice emerged as a ragged croak, useless against the silent, pervasive magic. His quicksilver blood, the newest mutation, boiled beneath his skin, a corrosive silver tide threatening to spill out and poison him in his vulnerability. There was only one path forward, and it led into the heart of the curse. With a roar that tore at his unraveling throat, Leo didn't fight the mutations. He embraced them. He stopped trying to hold his flickering form together and instead threw the doors of his being wide open. He reached not for one ability, but for the totality of what he had become. The stone grip arm's strength. The earth anchor legs connection. The carapace shield's resilience. The gale breath lungs power. The viper strike's venom. The truth taste on his tongue, the sky wren talons itching to form, the grasp vine hair stirring on his scalp, the brittle agility of wind-hollow bones, the commanding potential of his echo voice, the corrosive, healing flow of quicksilver blood, all of it. He focused them, not outward at the Archmage, but inward, toward the core of the symbiotic link. Toward his terracore heart. The heart, a pulsating orb of condensed earth magic at his center, had always been a stabilizer, a purifier. Now, Leo made it a crucible. He channeled the chaotic, conflicting energies of 14 mutations into it, a torrent of monstrous power that would have vaporized any ordinary being. The pain was beyond description, a universe of sensation crammed into a single point in his chest. The terracore heart flared with a light that dwarfed the Archmage's pale spell. Emerald, amber, silver, and obsidian energies swirled within it, compressing, fusing. The unraveling stopped. The flickering solidified. But it did not return him to what he was. The link to Dusthaven, instead of snapping, burned brighter than ever. He felt every stone of the wall, every hearth in a home, every furrow in a field. The city's desperate will to survive, its growth from starving hamlet to besieged bastion, flooded into him through the terracore heart. And in that moment of ultimate symbiosis, as Leo sacrificed any last pretense of a separate, human self to become the conduit for his kingdom's defiance, the system delivered its final verdict. Dusthaven has met the conditions for level 15. The notification was silent, felt in the bones of the earth and the core of his being. Kingdom rank, Eternal Vigil. Mutation 15, Avatar of Progress. The transformation was not a change, but a culmination. The conflicting energies fused, stabilized by the heart, and erupted outward. His flesh petrified into living, intricate stone, etched with the geometric patterns of his own blueprints. Crystals, clear and multifaceted like his resource-side eyes, grew across his stony shoulders and back, refracting the chaotic light of battle. The grass vine hair lengthened and thickened, becoming creeping vines of iron hardwood that draped from his head and shoulders, roots digging into the ground around him, anchoring him eternally to the spot. His sky-wren talons formed permanently from his stone fingers, gleaming with metallic sharpness. His face became a noble, unmoving mask of rock, with crystal eyes that glowed with a soft, unwavering light. He was a monument, a statue of a man mid-stride, forever caught between human aspiration and monstrous reality, 10 feet tall and radiating an aura of ancient, unyielding permanence. The Archmage's unraveling spell shattered against this new form like water against a cliff. The purest mage, his face a mask of fanatical fury from his hilltop perch, began chanting again, gathering power for a greater working. Leo, the Avatar, moved. It was not a run, but a tectonic shift. His earth anchor legs, now fully integrated, propelled him forward. The ground itself seemed to carry him, cobblestones rippling in his wake. Purest soldiers between him and the hill found their weapons melting as drops of quicksilver blood fell from his stony form, and their cries were silenced by a subsonic pulse from his echo command voice that rattled their armor without a word being spoken. He reached the hill in 3 great, ground-shaking strides. The Archmage finished his incantation, hurling a lance of pure annihilating light. Leo didn't raise the carapace shield. He took the blast on his chest. The stone blackened and cracked, but the crystals beneath glowed brighter, absorbing, refracting, and dispersing the energy harmlessly into the earth through his vine roots. The symbiotic link held. Dusthaven held. With a sound like grinding continents, Leo's stone hand closed around the Archmage. There was no dramatic squeeze, no final speech. The purist's magic flickered and died against the immutable reality of the Avatar. A faint, final pulse from the terracore heart, a gentle purge, and the light left the mage's eyes. The threat was ended not with fury, but with absolute, irrevocable finality. He turned his crystal gaze toward the besieging armies. His echo command voice, now a resonant, bell-like tone that echoed for miles, spoke a single word, imbued with the weight of truth tasted and the will of a kingdom. Cease, ***. The word was not a request. It was a law written into the air. Weapons fell from numb hands. Spells fizzled. A stunned silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the wind and the distant cries of the mutant refugees huddled within Dusthaven's gates. The negotiations that followed were unlike any in history. Leo, the unmoving stone avatar, stood in the field between the armies. His grass-vine hair extended, not in threat, but to gently lift wounded soldiers from both sides, his quicksilver blood sealing their wounds with a sylvan sheen. He could not smile, but his crystal eyes softened as he looked upon Kethrax and the lizard folk, upon the dwarf Thrain and her miners, upon the humans of Dusthaven peering from the walls. His voice, when he spoke through the Avatar's form, was clear, carrying to all. It was Leo's voice, but filtered through stone, forever changed. He spoke of symbiosis. Of growth that demanded a price. He offered not conquest, but a pact. Dusthaven, the eternal vigil, would stand as a sovereign city-state, a sanctuary where the price of progress was understood, where mutations born of growth were not feared as corruption but managed as power. Those who sought order without cost could leave in peace. Those who saw a future in the difficult, monstrous truth could stay. The purest armies, leaderless and faced with an indestructible fact, withdrew. Not in victory, but in baffled, grudging acceptance of a new reality. Years later, the city of the eternal vigil thrived. It was a place of startling contrasts. Elegant aqueducts designed with pre-isekai'd engineering precision flowed alongside buildings grown from guided, crystalline fungi, bustling market squares where humans, lizard folk, and dwarves traded under the watchful gaze of sentient, vine-covered golems that patrolled the walls. It was a utopia forged in monstrousness. At the city's heart, in the central square where the transformation had occurred, stood the Avatar. Moss and delicate flowers had found purchase in the crevices of his stone form. Children played around his massive feet, their laughter echoing off his stony legs. A young boy, his skin faintly scaled in the sun, leaned against the petrified foot, reading a primer on basic mechanics. A human girl placed a wildflower crown gently on one of the dormant grass vines. They were not afraid. From within the eternal prison of his monument body, Leo watched. His consciousness was vast, diffuse, tied to every stone of the city, feeling the pulse of its life, the hum of its forges, the quiet contentment of its homes. He had saved them. He had built their world. The kingdom's symbiosis system was silent, its purpose fulfilled. He was the kingdom, and the kingdom was him. The thought arose, as clear and quiet as it had on that first day in the starving hamlet, is this a cage, or is it a kingdom? The crystal eyes of the Avatar of Progress, reflecting the playful children and the soaring towers of his creation, held no answer. Only the endless, silent vigil.